The decision was made about 4 days ago.
The decision to take the death penalty off the table in exchange for Christopher Watt's guilty plea to all 9 counts he was originally charged with, including first-degree murder of a child under 12, tampering with a deceased body, and unlawful termination of a pregnancy.
The Watts family murders. This is undoubtedly one of the most horrific crime stories of our era. Over 5 years has passed, and with each passing year, with each passing day, nothing about this case becomes more clear. Looking back on the investigation of this case and the prosecution of Chris Watts, you have to ask yourself, was anything ever meant to be clear? Was justice ever meant to be achieved?
Oh, good girl. Oh, I love it. Good job. High five, baby.
I won't say with her. Don't take her away.
By the time you are done watching this video, you're going to understand that something very wrong happened in the initial hasty investigation of this case. A case so horrific, the whole world began watching right away because the whole world wanted to know, how could a seemingly loving father do something so horrible? The very family members who trusted him, who counted on him, who relied on him. Meet District Attorney Michael Rourke. This is the man who accepted lip service as answers about this horrible crime that people to this day still cannot wrap their heads around.
Stop asking about it. She didn't have anything to do with it. She wasn't there that morning. She voluntarily cooperated with law enforcement. She provided us all the information. I'm not going to tell you where she's at. Stop. Leave me alone.
All right, everybody, welcome back to Watts the Obsession True Crime on this Sunday evening. Thank you guys so much for being here. And all I have to say is stop. Don't ask me about it. Leave me alone. Just like District Attorney Michael J. Rourke. Yeah. So tonight we are going to be talking about the namesake case for this channel, the Watts case, and specifically we are going to be talking about what the hell happened. Nicole Kessinger, Chris Watts' mistress, committed crimes, period. We know that. We've proven that. If you don't know that, watch my videos, Bombshell 1 and 2 and the Ultimatum 1 and 2. We're going to watch some clips from that today, and you will be convinced that that is the truth. So District Attorney Michael J. Rourke and the District Attorney's Office just turned their back on the fact that a woman committed crimes related to this horrible, horrible tragedy that took the life of a 15-week pregnant woman, Shanann Watts, a 3-year-old little girl, Cece Watts, and a 4-year-old little girl, Bella Watts, a little sweetheart she is. So what is up with that? What crimes do we know Nicole Kessinger committed above and beyond what is, readily available public information? Some of that information is going to be forthcoming very soon when my friend Kathleen McKenna-Hootson releases her next book on the Watts case. So be looking for that. 5 of you here who were raffle winners in our recent 4-year anniversary raffle, or 4-year anniversary, I can't say that word, raffle won the first 5 copies, and we will be giving more away. More information will be disclosed in that manner. Let's just say it's a little better to release some information in a book than it is on YouTube, my friends. Kathleen and I are very close. Just so you know, tomorrow night there is going to be another live stream, and that is going to be about Brian Koberger. New details learned since a plea deal from, just public filings and some other things that have become public, and also from inside sources connected specifically to this channel. So be looking for that. I'm so glad you guys are here tonight, and I hope you'll join us tomorrow night too. Let me just say hello to those in chat, and we'll get started right away. So my wonderful moderators, Pepper, Sherry, Cuff You, Kevin B. Oh, it's so great to see you here, Kevin B. Anaphylaxis. Honey Bun, and if I missed any, Nina, warning label Nina, if I missed anybody, I'll catch you as I'm scrolling through. Thank you guys so much. Someone asked recently, why does this channel have so many moderators? Well, guys, it's the Watts case. That's all I'm going to say. And hi, Allie. How are you doing? Alice in Wonderland, great to see you as well. And also Leslie Harris, it's wonderful to see you. Simone Luna Lopez, great to see you. Thank you so much for being here. Lorna, welcome. So nice to see you as well. Halzi, thank you for being here. Oh, my girl is here. I was hoping you were going to be here. I was just getting on my phone to text you. She says, hi, everyone. Books through legal 10 days to publication. Please get Kelly your address if you won one. Rourke is getting a signed copy that I'm delivering in person because I'm such a fangirl. Me too, Kathleen. I will go with you. I'm so excited you're here, my friend. Awesome. That is our author friend, Kathleen Hootson. If you haven't read her books yet, definitely check them out if you like true crime. She is just a real first-class author, and it'll be a treat. Offline, welcome. How are you doing? Hey, Daniel Wiley. It's great to see you. Let's see. Let me keep going up a little bit. Hey, Danine, CPLC. And thank you for becoming a member. I saw that you became a member. Thank you so much for that. Oh, I can start that right here. Awesome. And let me just check out a couple more up here. And if I didn't say hi to you, please say hello. I'll try to say hello back. Do not take it personally. It's just because my eyes ain't just what they used to be, and I missed your name. Nothing personal, okay? All right. And I saw McJay at some point, I think. And Kara Yim Loy, welcome all the way from New Zealand. Oh my gosh, that's awesome. And how's weather in New Zealand now? Cold, right? Man, it's hot here. That's why my camera's not on. I was just exercising outside and I am hot. Hey, Karen G, it's so great to see you. Always love it when you're here. Okay, guys. Now, just a little bit of like kind of channel housekeeping. You know, people do like to give super chats sometimes. They like their comments read. And I certainly appreciate the support of the channel. And, you know, in true crime, things get unmonetized all the time, every day. And I very much do appreciate it. If you do want to do a super chat and you'd rather do it through PayPal or Cash App, you know, the PayPal account is just Watts Obsession. The Cash App account is $ Watts Obsession. Everything is something Watts Obsession, right? And you can do it like that. I have my phone right here and I will read it. I can even put it up on the screen just like a super chat. And also YouTube now, for all people that are so generous to give channels super chats and things like that, it's taking like 50%. So it gets a little bit crazy. Hey, Cyberpunk Central, it's great to see you as well. Hey, Joan, welcome. Nice to see you. Hey, Hurt Locker 66. I was thinking about you just yesterday. And I was thinking about you because I was watching Hidden True Crime talking about the Travis Decker case, which we will be talking about this week on this channel. And he recommended the movie The Hurt Locker. But I was thinking of you, our Hurt Locker here. It's great to see you. Hey, Bloodbath, welcome. How are you doing? It's great to see you as well. Hey, Julia Turner, nice to see you as well. Loved your comment on my post the other day or yesterday. It was great. So yeah. Okay, guys. So, you know, let's just get started. Okay. So again, we are talking about law enforcement's essential collusion with Chris Watts' former mistress, Nicole Kessinger, relating to the crimes that she committed having to do with this tragedy. And guys, I'm telling you, there's a lot more that there are proof of she having committed than the ones that have been made public. I always have to like word that very carefully, okay? Hey, Dawn David, welcome. Thank you so much for becoming a member. Okay, so I'm just going to bring something into the stream here. We're going to watch. This is all created material for you guys. Some things I've released, some things that I haven't, and then we will stop and talk at certain points, okay? Again, guys, thank you so much for being here. Please, please take a moment to hit like, do that YouTube thing, and I'd appreciate that so much. There's fireworks going on here, so if you hear that in the background, happy 4th of July.
Counts he was originally charged with, including first-degree murder of a child under 12, tampering with a deceased body, and unlawful termination of a pregnancy.
The Watts family murders. This is undoubtedly one of the most horrific crime stories of our era. Over 5 years has passed, and with each passing year, with each passing day, nothing about this case becomes more clear. Looking back on the investigation of this case and the prosecution of Chris Watts, you have to ask yourself, was anything ever meant to be clear? Was justice ever meant to be achieved?
Sunshine, my own sunshine, and we gather
Oh, good girl. Oh, I love it. Good job. High five, baby.
No, I'll stay with her. Don't take her away.
By the time you are done watching this video, you're going to understand that something very wrong happened in the initial hasty investigation of this
You want the
case.
turtle, Mommy?
A case so horrific, the whole world began watching right away because the whole world wanted to know how could a seemingly loving father do something so horrible. The very family members who trusted him, who counted on him, who relied on him, who loved him, and never questioned his love for them or his commitment to their family. Chris Watts took the lives of his wife, who was 15 weeks pregnant, his 4-year-old daughter, Bella Watts, his 3-year-old daughter, Cece Watts,
So I'm here with my little munchkins.
and the unborn baby that was going to be his very first son, baby Nico Watts. This crime is so horrible. People either refuse to even learn about it, and once they turn their heads and their attention to the story of this crime, they seem to not be able to turn away. I dare to say it's impossible to overestimate the strength of feelings, of passion, of opinions that people have about this case. Many of us feel a unique and peculiar bond to this case, to the family, to the Watts family, because we can relate to them. With this true crime case more than any other, we've heard more people say that they feel a strong connection to the victims, to the family, and to the victims' family members who are still alive. Now, you would think with a case as horrific as this that law enforcement and the prosecutor's office would share the same passion for pursuing justice as does the public, for the victim's sake and for the family member's sake. I mean, when you just look at the basic elements of this case, the murder of a pregnant woman, a 3-year-old and 4-year-old baby, and the way that the bodies were disposed of, it's absolutely egregious. There really aren't words that can describe how horrific this crime was. This is the kind of crime that causes us to put our faith and trust in the justice system and the prosecutor's office. Because after all, what more horrific crime could be committed by a human being? This is the kind of crime where if you give a crap about justice, you are going to make sure that the perpetrator of this crime is prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, that all of them are. Meet District Attorney Michael Rourke. This is the man who accepted lip service as answers about this horrible crime that people to this day still cannot wrap their heads around. This is a district attorney who had no interest in pursuing complete justice for Shanann, Bella, Celeste, baby Nico, and their family members and friends.
Stop asking about it. She didn't have anything to do with it. She wasn't there that morning. She voluntarily cooperated with law enforcement. She provided us all the information. I'm not going to tell you where she's at. Stop. Leave me alone.
That was District Attorney Rourke commenting on Nicole Kessinger in March of 2023. The context is that he's on his wife's podcast, Survivor's Guide to True Crime, and he's scoffing about the popularity of the discovery files, saying that Weld County had to come up with a system to disseminate the discovery files, and kind of, so many people wanted to read the discovery files for this case. He said that it's as recently as last week that he received an email asking to open the case to investigate Nicole Kessinger, and says a moderate estimate is that his office has received 5,000 to 6,000 emails making that same request. Let's see what DA Rourke had to say about Chris Watts' mistress after his sentencing in November of 2018.
Can you give us a better idea of her role in the investigation, how forthcoming she was, and how she helped?
She originally came forward and spoke to investigators on her own volition. Prior to the time, unfortunately, that she came in and spoke with investigators, she had deleted all of the information off of her phone that had any connection between her and Chris Watts. That hampered the investigation. That hampered our ability to get that electronic digital connection between the two. She was interviewed on multiple occasions. I believe that for the most part, she was forthcoming.
It's clear that there are some major discrepancies between what District Attorney Rourke said in 2018 after the sentencing and then what he said most recently on his wife's podcast in March of 2023. In his most recent recollection, he says that she came forth voluntarily and she was forthcoming with the information that she gave to investigators. Yet in 2018, after Chris Watts' sentencing, he said that she hampered the investigation by not giving investigators all of the information. And then he says that he believes that she was forthcoming for the most part. Very different statements, Rourke. We know the truth about Nichol Kessinger, and we know which of his statements is the accurate one, the 2018 statement or the 2023 statement. And the accurate statement is the 2018 statement, and it's an understatement because we know Nichol Kessinger obstructed justice by destroying evidence. We know this hampered the investigation, and we know that she was absolutely, completely not at all forthcoming with investigators. Not at all, not whatsoever. But let's go ahead and set aside the mistress for a moment and just look at what happened with Chris Watts' plea deal. Now, first of all, it is not the district attorney's office that put that plea on the table and forced the defense and Chris Watts, the defender himself, to consider whether or not he wanted to take it and what it would cost him to take that plea deal and what he would be gaining as an advantage, which is normally how a plea deal works. What happened was the defense put this plea deal on the table, and let's be clear about it. It was District Attorney Rourke who accepted this plea deal unconditionally, without any conditions whatsoever. Over the course of the 3 years that I've had this channel, I have talked to a number of attorneys about this issue because it's always burned my ass, quite frankly. Why did District Attorney Rourke not make Chris Watts tell them what happened when he decided to accept the plea deal that Chris Watts and his team put on the table? Why did he accept that plea deal without condition? This is from the Law and Crime Network. There are some odd things about the circumstances surrounding the plea deal Chris Watts struck with prosecutors, according to Law and Crime Network's host and former Morris County, New Jersey prosecutor Bob Bianchi, head prosecutor. Circumstances that he would never have allowed to happen under his watch. Quote, "What I do find to be unusual in this case is that I would have required a proffer session with the defendant where he would have sat down. In order to be spared the death penalty, he would have had to spill the beans on everything from..."
Now, I just want to say, I actually played the recording of this interview with this former district attorney, Bob Bianchi, who I like very much, in relation to the Brian Koberger case and his recent shocking plea deal, because this, well, the part that was just read would apply to him as well. And, well, unfortunately, doesn't seem like that happened for him either. What's going on here, state's attorneys? What's going on?
A to Z. We would have known what the motive is, which we don't know right now. And he would have had to have clearly allocated to court to go up and say, this is why I did it. A district attorney is doing their thing in the pretrial phase or in trial. They are doing their thing, hopefully, for the sake, ultimately, of justice on behalf of the victims and, of course, taking the family's wishes into account. And part of that job is finding justice for the people that they serve, the public who needs answers, who demand answers, who deserve answers to these horrific crimes. After all, this is how our justice system is founded. It's justice for the people and by the people. Did you hear that? For the people. Crime in a society is a very real thing to everybody in that society, not just those who are immediately impacted by that crime. And there are reasons that human beings need answers when such horrible, egregious things happen, like they did in this tragic case of the Watts family. The public, yes, does deserve answers. Here is District Attorney Rourke talking about this case and the decision he had to make in his wife's podcast in March of 2023.
Back to the night where I come home from work, I know that we're contemplating seeking the death penalty. And as the elected DA, that's my decision. That's not anybody else's. I'm going through a process of talking to law enforcement, community leaders, my own commissioners for budget reasons, her family, like I have talked about, senior leadership in my office, and my wife, because there's a recognition that this is the ultimate decision I have to make. I'm going to take somebody's life if litigation goes the way it should in this case.
So the gravity of this case is impending on District Attorney Rourke, and he consults, fellow law enforcement personnel that worked on this case, people that had to do with budget decisions, the victim's family, and we're going to come right back to that, and his wife. Well, isn't that good to know? Now, discussing what District Attorney Rourke had to say about Shanann Rusick's parents had to say about pursuing the death penalty or not, the story changed from what had been told all along to, again, what District Attorney Rourke had to say in this podcast that came out of March 2023. When this podcast came out, people were astonished to find out that District Attorney Rourke said when he was talking to the family in North Carolina, the decision was essentially split. And it was Frank Rusick that did not want to go after the death penalty, meaning it was Sandy Rusick who ultimately wanted initially, until, in my opinion, District Attorney Rourke talked her out of it. And you can decide that for yourself. I'm going to play some sound clips here. She wanted the death penalty until she was ultimately talked out of it.
Steve Wren, my chief deputy, and I flew to North Carolina and went to Shanann's parents' house to sit down with them in their living room to talk to them about the process, what they wanted to see happen, the realities of death penalty litigation in Colorado. And that's just not something you could have a conversation over the phone about. Ultimately, the outcome of that was a split. I mean, one parent wanted the death penalty. The other, Shanann's father, wanted us to make sure that this defendant never saw the light of day. And ultimately, he did plead guilty to everything we charged him with.
Now, how such a decision is arrived at and what is said behind closed doors and then how it is portrayed to the public may really not...
I got to sync my talking with my pausing. So did you catch that, guys? District Attorney Rourke, said right after the tragedy, oh, it was Sandy Rusick who, convinced us, that it was okay to go with the plea deal, that, it wasn't his decision to take the lives of my family members. It's not my decision to take his life. And then later he said it was Frank Rusick who made that decision and, implied that Sandy wanted the death penalty. I think this is such a gross insult to the families. And when you are in charge of prosecuting a case of this magnitude, how can you get any details wrong, particularly the important, intimate ones that this district attorney, hey, dude, it's your last term as district attorney of Weld County, by the way, like he did. You know what I'm saying? It's just awful. It shows his level of conscientiousness, and care about justice, victims, and the job that he does. Not well.
Be any of our business, and I can certainly admit to that. But what I do think is our business is how this case was treated altogether, big picture, throughout, by District Attorney Rourke. When he, in March of 2018, all of a sudden came out and offered that information that flew in the face of everything everybody had been told about why the death penalty was not sought, it was because Sandy Rusick, and her big heart and all of her grace, did not want death for Chris Watts, or she did not want to make that decision on his life that he made for her family. And I don't judge her at all. However she felt about the situation, my gosh, bless her heart, there was no judgment at all from me. But to come out on in a podcast in March of 2018, over 5 years after this tragedy occurred and kind of flip the script was a little bit strange. Now here is Mrs. Sandra Rusick, Shanann's mother, speaking at the sentencing hearing in November of 2018. You'll just notice that what she says here, although I believe absolutely heartfelt and our hearts go out to you, Mrs. Rusick, is different than what District Attorney Rourke had to say in 2023 about how the parents fell regarding whether to pursue the death penalty or not.
I want the world to know that our daughter and her children were so loved by us. They will always be protected by God and his mighty angels. I didn't want death for you because that's not my right. Your life is between you and God now, and I pray that he has mercy for you.
And now,
I just want to say that on this channel, you guys are so great in chat. We respect both victims' families, and that means the Watts family, Chris Watts' parents and his sister. They're essentially good people. They've done nothing wrong. And certainly the Rusick family, same. They're essentially good people. They've absolutely done nothing wrong. And I feel Sandy Rusick is a woman who is so full of grace. I just think it's really a beautiful thing, even through all of her pain.
I'll listen to District Attorney Rourke talk about the final piece of the sentencing agreement, which is the plea deal that he accepted, that Chris Watts and his defense team put out there. And it's that Chris Watts won't face the death penalty. But, he goes from A to Z and skips everything from B to Y in the middle. He doesn't want people to ask, well, why did you not hold Chris Watts accountable? Why did you not put a condition on accepting the plea that he so willingly put out there? And in my opinion, he puts the hook on the Rusick family while he's peddling a political agenda and really paying no mind to justice in this case. This has always bothered me so incredibly much.
The final piece of the sentencing agreement calls for the district attorney's office, myself, to agree that as a result of his plea of guilty, that he will not face the death penalty. I know that there are going to be a lot of questions about that, so let me address that right up front. Present here in the room with us today is Frank Rusick, Sandra Rusick, and Frank Rusick Jr., Shanann's brother, mom and dad. Mr. Wren and I flew out to North Carolina about 3 weeks ago and spent quite a bit of time with the Rusick family talking about the state of the death penalty in Colorado, the realities of the death penalty. We explained to them the extraordinary delays that currently exist in the state of Colorado as a result of, in part, the actions of our current governor. We discussed the fact that an individual by the name of Nathan Dunlap was convicted and sentenced to death in 1996 and is still alive today. We discussed all of the possible consequences, delays, penalties, timeframes, and I hope I'm saying this accurately. I know they'll correct me if I am wrong, but they were very strongly in favor of a resolution in this case, short of the death penalty.
If you're the one guy in the world who's been entrusted with the responsibility of securing justice for Shanann, Bella, Celeste, and baby Nico, but your heart's just not really in it for some reason, well, at least we all know that you have some meaningful connection to those precious victims who lost their lives far too soon in the most horrible way one can think of at the hands of somebody that they loved and trusted. In this excerpt you're about to hear from the podcast, A Survivor's Guide to True Crime, District Attorney Rourke is talking about why he did not show up at Survey 319, why he did not go to the actual scene of the crime, or at least the scene where the bodies were found, and why he did not want to actually see with his own eyes the horror that was caused when this crime was committed. And in doing so, he remarks about seeing some of the Facebook videos that so many of us have seen that Shanann proudly put on her Facebook page, where you got to get a little inside look into the lives of Shanann, Bella, and Celeste. Hear what he has to say about that.
Bella and Celeste were, like I said, 3 and 4-year-old little girls with very long, glowing blonde hair who liked to run around the living room, dance, sing, and do cartwheels. We knew that because we had some social media posts that Shanann had put on her Facebook page or Instagram, one of them. And so I watched those and I saw those little girls, and My own daughter at the time was about that same age, long blonde hair, doing cartwheels in my living room, despite the fact she knows that's a family rule not to. And there was an immediate connection that I felt with those little girls because
Okay, guys, you know what? I'm going to go back about a minute and play that again because just like him getting wrong which of Shanann's parents was for or against the death penalty and then publicly speaking on it, also therefore humiliating them and possibly severely offending them, listen to how he characterized the Watts girls. This to me is so disgusting.
Was convicted and sentenced to death in 1996, and is still alive today. We discussed all of the possible consequences, delays, penalties, timeframes, and I hope I'm saying this accurately. I know they'll correct me if I am wrong.
I wish you did correct him here. Let me get sorry.
Of somebody that they loved and trusted. In this excerpt you're about to hear from the podcast, A Survivor's Guide to True Crime, District Attorney Rourke is talking about why he did not show up at Survey 319, why he did not go to the actual scene of the crime, or at least the scene where the bodies were found, and why he did not want to actually see with his own eyes the horror that was caused when this crime was committed.
Okay, so in his wife's podcast, he talks about how he did not go to the scene of the crime. He did not witness any of the horror. This is very unlike what most district attorneys would do, especially in an investigation in a crime of this magnitude. So again, here it is right here coming up at the moment after I unpause it. Listen to how he characterizes beautiful Bella and Celeste.
And in doing so, he remarks about seeing some of the Facebook videos that so many of us have seen that Shanann proudly put on her Facebook page, where you got to get a little inside look into the lives of Shanann, Bella, and Celeste. Hear what he has to say about that.
Bella and Celeste were, like I said, 3 and 4-year-old little girls with very long, glowing blonde hair who liked to run around the living room, dance, sing, and do cartwheels. We knew that because we had some social media posts that Shanann had put on her Facebook page or Instagram, one of them. And so I watched those, and I saw those little girls. And my own daughter at the time was about that same age, long blonde hair, doing cartwheels in my living room, despite the fact she knows that's a family rule not to. And there was an immediate connection that I felt with those little girls because of my daughter.
This case.
This is clearly total bullshit. He's like, oh, the two girls, Bella and Celeste, with their long, glowing blonde hair. Well, first of all, Bella didn't have blonde hair, and both girls were, it was known that they had remarkably short hair for little girls. And they certainly were not doing cartwheels in the living room. I don't know if they were old enough to pull it off, but they were not exactly the most physically adept girls. And we're not even going to talk about that, but ain't no Cece or Bella doing cartwheels. District Attorney Rourke, what a load of bullshit. Burns my butt. And Leslie Harris, thank you so much for the Cash App. I really appreciate the support. She just said thanks for all your hard work. And thank you so much, Leslie. I appreciate that very much.
This was so extraordinary, both in the career history of District Attorney Michael Rourke and in the history of, crime occurring in the world. It's hard to understand how he can get these details wrong, how these two little girls did not make an indelible and perfect impression in his mind that will last forever. District Attorney Rourke's treatment of this case was not the only thing that went wrong with this case after this horrible crime happened. The injustice that lingers and looms around this case is unacceptable. It's hard to even imagine an alternate universe where we could say, damn, oh my God, what a horrible crime. Well, at least we know the investigators left no stone unturned, and the people responsible for that were prosecuted to the fullest. There would be some sense of peace.
But we don't have that. But I just want to ask this, and I've started some comments. I'll go back and read them, later. But Kara Yim Loy, welcome, Kara, again, says, please correct me if I'm wrong. I saw somewhere that he was discussing the case with his wife while it was ongoing. Well, he talked about it publicly on his wife's podcast in March of 2023, but he does talk about while it was ongoing, the people that he talked to about the big decisions he had to make, including whether or not to pursue the death penalty, was his, his underling, Steve Wren, the financial people in the district attorney county financial office, and his wife. So if that's what you're asking, yeah, he did. And I think that's highly inappropriate. My dad was still alive. My dad was a lifelong practicing, very successful, highly respected attorney. He died about a year ago. And I talked to him about that. And he was like, oh my God, no way. He has so many problems with District Attorney Rourke and how he handled this case. I've talked about them over the years. But yeah, that was definitely one of them. So I'm glad you brought that up, Kara. Thank you.
Instead of getting that sense of justice and peace that we long for after seeing something so horrific happening, we don't get justice and peace, and rather we're left with things like this.
Yeah, I'm trying. I'm really trying to help you guys. I need you guys to help me too. Like,
Yes,
we'll
ma'am.
do this as a team, but just don't
So
fucking let me down,
the
please.
reason why we can't, like, I did think about this yesterday, that I would like to sit down with you once we have your text messages and the phone calls, and we can put them in some type of easily looking, that we can sit down and look at them and compare them, and we can kind of get the context of how everything was going that night. I would like to do that with you. Unfortunately, so the download that we got yesterday is going to take multiple days to be analyzed. I probably won't have it back till next week. And then because you guys did have so many text messages, one of my analysts is working on getting those in order, so we can put something together where we can actually sit down and discuss it. But I do think that's something that I want to do in the near future, sometime probably next week.
I mean, I can do that. I don't mind giving you guys my time. I just need you guys to like help me with my employer and try to just help me brace for this media thing.
I'm with you. We definitely need to accelerate the case, because the more it takes, the less sure that they are of situations.
He murdered her. She's out of the picture. You're never going to know if she was pregnant. If he can get away with murder, you're not going to. I got divorced from my wife. You say, do you understand what I'm saying here? If she's gone,
Don't lead,
hypothetically,
please.
Yeah.
Don't lead
hypothetically, if she, you understand where I'm going. If
Right,
you
but
didn't know,
you're leading into questions that are nothing with your.
if you didn't know though,
Wait, Nick,
that she was there.
did you hear what I said?
Yeah, I think this, we've all heard this part of the interview with her dad, and he says, wait a minute. You're leading into questions that has nothing with your what? I mean, the only place that sentence could end is nothing with your promise to us, your agreement that your office made with us about, my daughter being here today. I mean, I just think his speaking up there and the few words he says to me is a clear indication of some kind of agreement between the CBI at least, but we know it's also the FBI too, which is gross, and Nicole Kessinger. Ew. Y'all, we're not happy about that. Hear us?
I'm following.
Stop asking about it. She didn't have anything to do with it. She wasn't there that morning. She voluntarily cooperated with law enforcement. She provided us all the information. I'm not going to tell you where she's at. Stop. Leave me alone.
As I've talked about extensively in a number of videos on this channel, and many other people have talked about and well know, the investigation in this horrible case was lackluster. There were definite problems. Here's an example of one of those problems. While we are left with a lot of questions about the way that Nicole Kessinger was treated, the things that she said, and the way that she interacted with her interviewer, CBI's Kevin Kobach, we did not have answers to things that were right within our grasp in the name of justice for the victims. One of these examples is the way that Chris Watts' truck was thought about and was handled in the investigation.
Now, I'm going to play this through. I have talked about this particular issue that's coming up right here many times. So I know that some of you have heard me talk about it before, but guys, I really want you to focus on this, take this in, and just think about it. Let's talk about this. This is really, I mean, reprehensible.
In the discovery, it is noted that Jane, the dog handler's dog Cody, showed interest in Chris Watt's work truck. Let's take a look at the discovery as it pertains to Jane's dog and Chris Watt's work truck. On page 84 of the discovery, this is from Officer Catherine Lines. I entered the home with Jane and her canine, who she stated is a cadaver dog. As we moved through the home, Jane explained what type of scent the dog alerts to. Jane mentioned several times that the scent from people pools and collects in areas. The dog did not locate any human remains. The search continued from the neighborhood clubhouse west, then north, circling back to the home without success. Jane's dog was later taken to Chris Watt's work truck, which was parked just east of his home. Jane stated that the dog detected but gave no hard command. However, the dog did not enter the vehicle, and the doors to the vehicle remained closed. Now, on page 87 of the discovery, from Officer Perez, Supplement 14, it says, Christopher's work truck was parked just northeast in front of the house on the north side of the street, facing west. One of the dogs was taken to the work truck, and Jane advised the dog showed interest in the truck. Jane stated the dog did not alert for any human remains inside the vehicle, but the dog caught the scent of one of the three missing parties. Command staff was advised. They never bothered to go inside of the work truck. The truck was locked, and, well, could they just have asked Watts for the keys? Well, no, because it's not truly his property. The work truck is the property of Anadarko, but since the dog showed interest outside of the truck, you'd think it would be critical that they went inside of that truck, but no. They didn't even bother to get a warrant to go inside that truck so the dog who showed interest outside the truck could go inside the truck and see what the dog found in there. Certainly, given the story that we've been told, that Shanann and Bella and Celeste were taken from the Watts residence to Survey 319 in that truck, the dog would have hit. There should have then been a forensic investigation of that truck, and evidence would be found. So putting the situation with the dog aside, evidence still was obtained from Chris Watts' work truck. After the truck was taken, after Chris Watts was arrested, and the house and his property was searched as a crime scene. Take a listen to this.
Chris, did Shanann do something to them?
No, I don't know.
I'm curious.
I have no clue.
No, you would have known because they didn't leave the house. Did Shanann do something to them, and then did you feel like you had to do something to Shanann?
They were at the house when I left. They were there.
They weren't there. They didn't leave. They vanished.
They were
The
there.
only way they could have left is in your truck.
There's no way, because, like, I didn't just throw them in my truck.
You know your truck has GPS,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Because you told your boss, like,
Yeah.
hey, I'm going to separation, or maybe staying
Yeah.
at a friend's house, whatever. You know that thing pings every 10 seconds?
Yep.
So we will know exactly where you went.
And your company's giving that to us.
So there, you heard Colorado Bureau of Investigations Tammy Lee say it herself. She knows that Shanann, Bella, and Celeste left in Chris Watt's work truck. The investigators know that. There's really no other way they could have left unless they left through the back, which some people keep open as a possibility, and we really cannot rule it out since this case was not completely investigated. You might be surprised to know that although we know very little from an investigative standpoint about what happened inside of Chris Watt's work truck, meaning we haven't seen the results of any evidence that's been processed regarding the work truck, you might be surprised to know that evidence was actually collected from that work truck. Listen to this from the discovery. So going down to the third paragraph, after a brief discussion, it was decided that CBI would photograph, collect, and package all evidence located. CBI would also use adhesive-based rollers and collect any possible hairs, fibers, and other trace evidence from the Ford truck in an attempt to determine any recent possible occupants of the vehicle.
Okay, so this is again really, really super important. So we know that they collected all of these trace lifts from Chris Watt's work truck. One of the dogs indicated outside of the truck, but they never opened the door of the truck for the dog to go inside because they would have had to contact an Anadarko to get a warrant. Ooh, that's such a big deal if you're law enforcement. Insurmountable obstacle to getting inside the truck. Bullshit. Anyway, let's keep listening.
What I find to be of particular interest is the notation that the adhesive rollers collecting evidence, also known, guys, as trace lifts, was for the purpose of detecting any possible passengers or people that were transported in that vehicle. Now, you may be asking, well, what exactly was taken from Chris Watt's work truck as far as evidence, and what happened to it? What did we find out? Well, I hate to disappoint you. Listen to this excerpt from the discovery file. It should be noted that on September 4th, 2018, while running through the evidence submission list with lab tech Patricia Lopez, several items were listed that CBI Lab ultimately did not wish to take possession of at that time. Those items are crossed out on the evidence submission form, which has been added to the case file. The refused items are as follows. I'm going to read the last three items. Driver's side seat cover from work truck. Trace lift from center console of Chris Watt's work truck.
Now, note these things that I'm reading now were collected by investigators, but they were refused for lab analysis by the Colorado Bureau of Investigation, which renders the evidence that was collected completely 100% effing useless. Why did they not analyze this evidence that was already collected? So I just went driver's seat cover from the work truck, and then I'm reading the other ones here.
And trace lift from backseat driver's side of Chris Watt's work truck.
Where, by the way, he said his two children, who he claims were alive on the ride to Survey 319, and his wife's deceased body laid. They collected evidence from that place and refused to analyze it.
The items that were not taken by CBI are transported back to the Frederick Police Department and checked into evidence. Nothing further. So, my friends, what that means is the trace lifts that were taken from Chris Watt's work truck for the purpose of determining if any other occupants were in that truck, that evidence was actually collected. But CBI, Colorado Bureau of Investigation, chose to not send that evidence to their labs to analyze the evidence to determine what DNA could be found, what hair could be found, what other evidence, trace evidence could be found that would decisively identify what, if any, occupants were in Chris Watt's work truck, and they could also determine if those occupants were alive or deceased. It should be noted that on September 3rd, 2018, Dave Baumhofer wrote a letter to the CBI, Bureau of Investigations, Data and Evidence Analysis team, asking for several items to be analyzed among the evidence that had been collected in the investigation. All the items from Chris Watt's work truck were
refused for analysis the very next day on September 4th, 2018. When I realized the dates that this happened, it absolutely blew my mind, since September 3rd and September 4th are just about 3 weeks after the tragedy occurred, and Chris Watts did not plea until November. So what were they doing, refusing any kind of evidence related to this horrible, tragic crime, especially having to do with Chris Watts' work truck? What are they hiding? It's funny how at certain benchmark times after this horrible crime was committed, certain things went missing. For example, from Shanann Watts' Facebook page, certain things were no longer able to be located a short time after this tragedy, and then additional things as time went on. Things are not able to be located through even the most thorough of web searches when you try to find information out in a general information search on the internet. It's really strange. It seems that some things, including Chris Watts' mistress herself, when completely and fully missing, poof, vanished from the face of the earth. These are some of the posts from Shanann Watts to her Facebook page that were made on August 12, 2018 that you cannot find now. They went missing very shortly after this tragedy happened.
And we are going to go deeper into this here. The post that I'm talking about, the last post that Shanann made on the day before the murders on that Sunday, August 12th, that were taken down nearly immediately. We're going to go into that a little deeper. I just want to say that there. And just again, the point about the truck, even after Tammy Lee says, we know that the family left in that truck. The only way they could have left that house is in that truck. And then they collected all of the evidence from the truck on September 3rd. Guys, this crime happened on August 13th. On September 3rd, Dave Baumhover received a letter from the CBI saying, nope, we refuse that evidence for analysis. We're not analyzing any of the evidence that you collected from Chris Watts' work truck. The clock stopped when he made a plea deal on November 6th. My ass. That letter was dated September 3rd. It was decided this case was not going to be investigated very early on. Think about that and let me know what you think in the comments.
Ready to get home to Chris and the girls, she wrote around 3 p.m. on August 12th, the day before the murders, while she was in Arizona on her Thrive trip. And then at 5:20 p.m., she wrote, same day, August 12th, felt the baby move twice this weekend. I wonder why these posts were scrubbed from the internet shortly after this tragedy happened.
Wait, so I just want to make that point again. So, and like, I get the spirit of this comment, and I know that we agree here. Cyberpunk Central says, agree, it's nuts. The guilty plea shut all the research down. So I have a visual timeline somewhere because that's how I am. Like, it's easier for me to see it than to hear it. So if you're like me, listen carefully. The plea deal was made on November 6th. Okay, November 6th. The tragedies happened on August 13th. So that's roughly, 2.5, almost 3 months after the tragedies happened. But that letter from CBI refusing to analyze the evidence that was already collected from inside Chris Watts' work truck that would have told them definitively who was in that work truck and if they were dead or alive or an accomplice. That letter was dated September 3rd, over 2 months before the plea deal. So to say the plea deal shut down the investigation, no. That's at least 2 months and 3 days after the investigation was shut down, we know, from the way that they handled this case. I think that's a really, really important point. I just want to emphasize that.
They've been removed from the history books. I'm sure whoever removed them, and for the reason they were removed, they certainly hoped that nobody was going to continue to look into these issues, to try to find the things that were hidden by, well, who hid them anyway? When we do the research, the comparisons over time, we can see what items went missing, when, and not always where, but we can start to put all those pieces back together. I personally believe it's relatively clear why specific things went missing at certain times since the morning of August 13th, 2018. I'll tell you one thing, things start to look very interesting when you closely examine what exists, what has been hidden, and what has been altered, what has been destroyed. You may or may not know that on page 283 of the redacted discovery, there is an evidence collection log that records the collection of the interview of Nicole Kessinger from, remember, this horrible tragedy that took the lives of Shanann, Bella, Celeste, and unborn baby Nico happened on Monday, August 13th. So this is 2 days after. Nicole Kessinger had just given her first interview to the FBI on that day, on the 15th, in a park near her house with her doggie and her daddy both present. On this document, it states under the details, recorded interview of Nicole Kessinger, parentheses, and in all capital letters, protect identity, end parentheses, on August 15th, 2018. We're going to talk more about that. So listen, I believe that Chris
So one
Watts
other thing
is
that you guys are talking about in chat is the ping. I made a very complete video about this a while ago, and I have nothing more to say about it because I think what we concluded when we did this research and investigation, and when I say investigation, I'm not just talking about me. I used to, my former career as a site acquisition specialist. I worked for this guy who was a friend of mine who has a site acquisition firm, so that's work in telecom and expanding the wireless networks. Anyway, he is an expert in everything telecom, digital communications, and does work in forensics. So he and a radio frequency engineer, who is one of the smartest guys, honestly, I've ever met in that regard, and many others, did an analysis of the phone ping and all of the data that we have from the Watts case, especially relating to Nicole Kessinger. They definitely did a complete analysis of that, everything that's available. They were able to determine that her phone ping occurred with her device being less than 300 to 400 yards from the Watts house. So 400 yards is a quarter of a mile. They were able to determine, and this is the greatest specificity they were able to determine. So listen carefully. Her phone pinged in somewhere under less than 300 to 400 yards from the Watts house. So it could be anywhere from ground zero, spot on, smack dab in the center of the Watts house, up to 400 yards from the Watts house. So we have a 400-yard radius right around the Watts house in which Nicole Kessinger's phone pinged at 6:16 a.m. that morning, about 20 minutes after Chris Watts' work truck left the driveway and headed with his family's bodies, whatever the case may have been, in his work truck to dispose of them so disrespectfully and horrifically at Servy 319. She pinged within under 300 to 400 yards of the Watts house. The distance from the Watts house to the highway that she would have been driving on, if she were just driving on the highway on her way to work, is more than 400 yards. In fact, it's about half a mile. The margin of error that my friends did when they said that the phone pinged under 300 to 400 yards from the house is nil. So you can bet the ranch on that. Just want to clarify that.
is completely guilty and he deserves to be in prison for the rest of his life, the rotten bastard, taking the lives of these beautiful people, his family members. There aren't even words, and nobody can comprehend what happened. What I have come to believe more and more as time passes is that his mistress, Nicole Kessinger, is somehow involved in this tragedy, and we already know, Kessinger, that she committed crimes in the investigation of this case straight away. She admits it herself.
So I removed it.
So you already said, but you removed text messages?
I deleted all of his stuff.
Yet investigators played softball with her, underhand pitches, every single question they asked for the entire duration of the interviews, for the entire duration of the 5 interviews she underwent with the FBI and Colorado's CBI. What exists in discovery? Combined with what we learned about Kessinger's actions and behaviors in the days following the tragedy and what she was trying to hide while she was being interviewed by law enforcement, when we compare what is known to be true and the stories that she clearly made up when she was being interviewed, shows us that she is likely somehow involved in this horrible, horrible tragedy. And what does not appear in discovery may indicate her guilt even more so than what is in that discovery document within the 1,960 pages. So here's what's real funny about the discovery. There are a lot of important events missing from the date August 12th, 2018. That is the day before Shanann, Bella, Celeste, and unborn baby Nico were murdered in the wee early morning hours of Monday, August 13th. It is a critical day, and there are so many critical details that are missing, from Shanann Watts' deleted post to Nicole Kessinger's conversations with other people besides Chris Watts, and the 111-minute phone conversation between Chris Watts and Nicole Kessinger. Even though the very first item, can you believe this, in the official discovery timeline is about Nicole Kessinger.
So this is another important point. I'm just going to again stop to emphasize this very important point. The very first timeline event in the official discovery timeline for these horrible crimes starts on September 1st, 2017, and it says Kessinger searched the internet for the name Shanann Watts. Now, this is interesting because law enforcement also knew that 1 month before, on August 7th, 2017, Nicole Kessinger searched for Chris Watts, but that is not included on the official discovery timeline. So again, the first event on the official discovery timeline is Nicole Kessinger's search for the name Shanann Watts on September 1st, 2017. The next item on the timeline jumps all the way forward to May 29th, 2018. Year and 3 quarters later. No, not that long. I can't do the math, but a while later. And it's talking about how Shanann was filming herself in the kitchen with a "Oops, We Did It Again" shirt, and she let Chris know that she was pregnant. And then after that, it says, I think it's 68 or 76 days later, Shanann, Bella, and Celeste were murdered. This is very important stuff. These details are not to be missed.
It says on September 7th, 2017, Nicole Kessinger Google searched the name Shanann Watts. Damn. This is a full 9 months before Nicole Kessinger and Chris Watts maintained that they even met at Anadarko. How is this possible? This question has been asked so many times, and DA Rourke confirmed that that search, in fact, happened. The appearance of that search as the first item on the official discovery timeline is a result of the forensic download of Nicole Kessinger's phone done by the FBI. It's a fact, and nobody can answer the question, why was she searching for Shanann Watts on September 1st of 2017?
All right, I just want to pause here to read this comment. And Sherry, thank you so much for the PayPal super chat of sorts. Thank you so much for your support. And again, Leslie Harris, thank you so much for the Cash App super chat. I appreciate you guys and appreciate the support. Let's see. Vero says, all right, listen carefully, guys. I'm gonna drop some little hints here. Are you here, Kathleen McKenna-Houston, true crime author with a Watts book coming out in 10 days? Vero asks, I'm also pretty sure she gave Chris Watts the oxy to try to make sure Shanann Watts aborted her baby. Yeah, so imagine if Nicole Kessinger did do that. And imagine if there was evidence of her illegally procuring this Oxycontin. And imagine if there was also evidence of her divulging / demanding this plan to give Shanann Watts this substance so Shanann would abort the baby. And imagine if that plan then later morphed and escalated and amplified into a plan to get rid of Chris Watts, her lover's husband. Imagine all of that. Then imagine if law enforcement knew about all of that. And imagine if they knew about all of that, but they still let Chris plead the way he did. And imagine if all of that happened, she did all of that, and law enforcement knew, and they still let her go scot-free. Just imagine that, because sometimes what we imagine is pretty damn close to reality.
It must be important since it is the very first item in the official discovery timeline. I mean, come on. Seriously. In the eyes of the investigators, it must mean that's when this whole horrible event and the information connected to it really began. That's where we need to start looking. It's the starting point. The starting point is Nicole Kessinger searching for Shanann Watts in September of 2017. My God, that's just incredible. And they let her walk free. Although Nicole Kessinger's name is littered throughout the discovery timeline, starting with September 1st, 2017, and she appears in it all the way through, her name literally appears scores of times in that discovery timeline until, remarkably, Saturday, August 11th, 2018. The last mention of Nicole Kessinger until her mentioning goes dark the following day, that Sunday, August 12th, the day before the murders, is a search that she made after she and Chris went out on a date to the Lazy Dog restaurant, one location, and then another. That timeline entry states at 22:04 hours, so that's 10:04 p.m., having concluded her evening tryst with Watts, Kessinger searched the internet on topics like Chris Watts, Shanann Watts, Ronnie Watts, and 2825 Saratoga Trail. And then, all of a sudden, on Sunday, August 12th, Nicole Kessinger disappears from the discovery timeline. Not to be mentioned, not even once. Conspicuously missing is the 111-minute phone conversation between Watts and Kessinger that Kevin Kobach asked her about over the course of his 4 interviews with her, the 2 video recorded ones, the police station, and the 2 ones that were had over the telephone. He asked about that conversation a total of 9 times throughout those 4 interviews. 9 times, at least, as far as I could count. And it's very likely that I missed him mentioning it at some point because there's hours upon hours upon hours of interviews with Nicole Kessinger. He asked her about that conversation 9 times. 9 times. Investigators also asked Chris Watts about that 111-minute phone conversation. That conversation was so important in the minds of law enforcement that when Tammy Lee, Graham Coder, and Dave Baumhover visited Chris Watts in February of 2019 after he had started serving his time in prison after he was sentenced to 4 life sentences. So let's hear what Chris Watts and his former mistress, Nicole Kessinger, have to say about that 111-minute phone conversation that was much longer than any other phone conversation they had ever had. Notice how they use a lot of the same language, the same words. Let's first go to Tammy Lee and Graham Coder questioning or interrogating Chris Watts on August 15th, 2018, before his, well, what I believe to be is a false and partial confession. And they took a plea deal on that. Oh my God. I also want to note that it is a popular belief that Chris Watts was not asked about that 111-minute phone conversation during this interview, that he wasn't asked until the interview at Dodge Correctional Facility in February of 2019. But we're going to see here that that's not true. He is asked about it by Tammy Lee.
What were you talking to Nikki about before your wife got home?
Before she got home,
You talked for like several hours.
I doubt it. I mean, we talked a lot. Conversations, random conversations. We talk a lot.
Does Nikki know about any of this? Seriously.
No, she doesn't know, like, I mean, she knows, like, from the news.
Let's get to the phone call on Saturday from 9 to 11. What did you guys, or pardon me, on Sunday from 9 to 11?
Yeah, we talked a few times. So, Sunday, I think so. I need to think. I can't even think.
Take a couple breaths and take a second.
Sunday night. I don't even know. I don't think I was like concerned about anything at that point.
You guys had had a meal the night before. You know, his wife was probably coming home late that evening.
Oh, you know what? I still don't remember what we talked about. I like, honestly, like, we talked about so much random stuff. Like, it's so hard to pinpoint some of these things. I don't remember what we talked about. I do remember that was a long phone conversation that we probably talked about all sorts of stuff. One thing I do remember though, that I didn't remember earlier when I was talking to Mark. So this is like where I'm starting to remember like little bits and pieces. I don't remember. Yeah, I know. This was the phone conversation. I don't remember what was in the phone conversation. Probably nothing of relevance, to be honest with you. But usually he talks to me when he's like down in the basement in his bed before he goes to bed and before I go to bed. And I could hear the TV on, which I thought was kind of weird. I didn't ask him. I just heard it in the background. And I remember thinking, and it was like right before we got off the phone, I was like, why the hell is he up? And there's like no TV downstairs. So I was like, well, maybe, I don't know.
No TV in the basement where he usually calls you from.
Yeah, and I don't know how many TVs they have. Like, I've never.
You know, so clearly her ass was burnt when she was, you know, she saw Chris laying, wasn't sure where. And she even admits it. She says, you know, I was thinking, like, why is he up? Another point, she says, maybe he's waiting for her, his wife.
We have gone over how investigators and prosecutors went out of their way to not dig deep into the evidence, to not really investigate this case at all, to not prosecute Chris Watts to the fullest extent of the law while getting as much from him as they possibly could for the sake of the victims' family members, and for the sake of the public. That's how the law is supposed to work. But it didn't work in this case. We also know the inordinate amount of time and energy that was spent on Nicole Kessinger, interviewing her, coddling her, handling her with kid gloves, allowing her to hide whatever she wanted to hide, destroy whatever she wanted to destroy, and change whatever story she wanted to change to fit the narrative she saw fit in that moment, which of course is a narrative that paints her in the kindest light and makes her look like the savior, the counselor, the therapist, the teacher, the life coach, the philosopher, the nutritionist, the environmentalist, the engineer, the hard worker, fiscally responsible, the thrift tag shopper that she fancies herself to be.
Okay, so I'm going to pause here. I'm going to read a few comments. And again, if you guys want to do super chats through Cash App or PayPal, you can do that just the same. I will read them just the same. And the information is in comments and some up on the screen, I think. Yes, in a banner. So this is going way back, but we're going to be talking about more. This is going to be a little bit of a long live. I have a lot of material for you because I want to put all of these things that I put out in various pieces of content together because that's what needs to be done, right? So Anaphylaxis, quite a while ago, and Anaphylaxis is one of our head mods, and she's also former retired law enforcement. It says she was there that morning. She came in to talk to law enforcement quickly because she was trying to get ahead of the story and see how much they knew. Amen, Anaphylaxis. Absolutely. And of all people, you would certainly know. And I definitely agree. Joan said they did not share evidence that she was not there. On the contrary, evidence that we know of shows she was in the area. I thought that was a really smart point, Joan, and very important point, too. A while back, again, Bloodbeth said, and Bloodbeth, I tried to reply to you in a couple of comments, and StreamYard is like blocking it. I don't know if it's because blood is in your, I don't know. Sorry about that. I wasn't ignoring you or what you were saying. I'm comfortable with loser boy being in prison, but he shouldn't have pics of his victims and he shouldn't receive fan mail. We need to protect those moronic women from themselves. That's such a great comment. And yeah, the fact that he has pictures of his family members, the same ones he killed, in his jail cell is a highly controversial point. What do you all think about that? Let us know in the comments here. Oh, and Julia Turner had said, did you discuss the secret apps, Rourke? Yeah, so, another channel put out a big video recently, and last live stream when Kathleen Hudson, the author, was in here, we were kind of laughing because we knew that it had been verified by law enforcement that Chris Watts and Nicole Kessinger were using WhatsApp a really long time ago. We're talking, we've known this for years, but this channel made it sound like it's new news. Yes, there are third-party apps on the phones that they were communicating through, and I think the next piece we're going to watch gets into that. This is very problematic. Vera says, why didn't they tell us, look, we have evidence Skanky Empanada was at this location, and that's Nicole Kessinger, for those of you who don't know, on this channel. Sometimes we lovingly call her Skanky Empanada or Empanada. Was at this location. Meanwhile, the murders, I know what you're saying, we can't say that on YouTube, happening, and shut all of us up. Right. If she wasn't there, if she had nothing to do with it, since Rourke was speaking out about her bombshell evidence and whatnot, and speaking out like an idiot across years after this crime happened, why not just say, guys, listen, shut the fuck up. Here's the evidence. Y'all need to shut up. Leave this woman alone. She's innocent. Right. Really good point. They haven't done that, though. Pepper, thank you for being a member for 11 months, and she's reminding y'all to hit like. Please take a moment and do that if you haven't yet, please. And see, Curry Wright asks, who is in control of Shanann's Facebook? Does anyone know who removed things off there? Well, her family. So we're not sure. Did they do it just because? Did they do it under the direction of law enforcement? We do not know. Law enforcement may have had control over it for a while. I'm not sure, but I know ultimately her family did. And then we already talked about this. Vera saying, I'm pretty sure she gave the Chris Watts the oxy to try to make Shanann Watts abort her baby. Now, I saw some of your comments. I'm not saying that OxyContin would make someone have a miscarry if they were pregnant. Look how many babies are born addicted to opiates of one sort or another every day across the world. But again, imagine if she did do that and she did procure illegally these OxyContin, and there was evidence that she was encouraging Chris Watts to have his wife lose the baby by giving her an overdose of these. And then imagine if that plan morphed and escalated and turned into an actual plan to get rid of Chris Watts' wife. And then imagine if law enforcement had evidence that all of that was done and said between Nicole Kessinger and Chris Watts. And imagine if they knew all of that from the very beginning, yet things happened just the way they have. And again, I encourage you to imagine that, because sometimes what we imagine is very close to actual reality. And hopefully you're picking up what I'm dropping there. Bring in a new piece in here. Let's see, which one do I need first? I think it's this one. Nope, it's the other one. And again, thank you guys so much for being here. Please just take a moment, hit like while I'm switching this up for you guys. And there's also going to be a live stream tomorrow night. We're going to be talking about the Idaho case, Bryan Kohberger's plea, new information that has come out since the plea was made, including information I have from our inside sources connected to the case. And also somebody who we're going to hear about what prison life is going to be like for Bryan Kohberger in upcoming weeks, and further from somebody who has done hard time in a state prison.
So you guys never had a conversation about the child, period.
I didn't know at all.
All right. And by your words, if you did know, you would have ended the relationship.
Well, because it wouldn't have made sense to me that he's like, I'm getting separated. Oh, by the way, I have a baby on the way. It's like,
that's 15.
You are a liar.
Oh, Miss Kessinger, you are a liar. Because at this point, it's a proven fact that you knew that Shanann Watts was pregnant with Chris Watts' baby, probably all along. If you're interested in watching a video about this, I'll leave a link to that video in the description box.
You're just trying to sleep with me. That's what I would have probably interpreted that as, and I'd have just shut that off at work, and that would have been the end of it.
All right, we can move past that. The week that he comes back from North Carolina, you don't remember, somewhere in the first couple of weeks of August.
Yeah, I think it was the second week, but I don't remember off the top of my head.
They're coming fast and furious. I dare to say that is another lie, because remember this interview takes place on August 16th, 2018. Nicole Kessinger knows exactly when Chris Watts left for North Carolina, and she certainly knows exactly when he returned.
So we'll just use August as a time frame. Is that fair? Because you know he left in July and he comes back in August. How many times do you think you see him?
I saw him a few times. I saw him this past Saturday. I saw him the Wednesday before that. And he wanted to see me more. I was the one who wanted my space. I was like, nope, your kids are home. Go hang out with your kids. And even on Wednesday, I cut it short. Like, he came and hang out with me for a few hours. Then I was like, go chill with your kids.
And y'all, our girl is on a roll, because we know from the geotab information that Chris Watts was at Nicole Kessinger's apartment on that Wednesday, August 8th, for 2 hours and 50 minutes. I mean, I guess, is she cutting that short? I don't know. But that is the same day when she gifted him a key to her apartment, knowing how much that would mean to him. And she didn't have to kick him out. He had to leave, because he had to go and show up at his wife's ultrasound appointment that he barely made because he stayed at her apartment until the very last minute. Let's hear what Chris Watts has to say about the nature of his relationship with Nicole Kessinger.
Did you and Nikki ever fight?
We never fought, but like I said, I had to calm her down a bunch of times. But a lot of things, when she realized that, okay, she's the other person in the relationship, that I always put my wife first over her, and that's what kind of made her take a step back a few times, and then I had to kind of calm her down.
Tell me about those times. What'd that look like?
So the first one was probably around July 4th when I had to leave her house, because she wanted to kind of spend most of the day together before she went to a baseball game or something. And when I had to leave, it kind of just made her kind of take a step back and wonder what she was doing. And I just told her hey, just because of what's going, just because I had to leave doesn't mean you have to just take a step. I was comforting her at some point. I don't even know why I was doing it. Maybe I knew I was too far gone at that point, but it was.
This is Shan's pissed. She's called you 10 times. You were sleeping.
Yeah.
Take your day off.
Yeah.
And then you go outside to talk to her on the phone and tell Nikki that you need to go home just in case she calls back and all that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what did she say to you, Nikki?
She was in the shower. She said, okay. And then that's when I talked about calm her down, she's on the phone.
And was she we're breaking up, we're not gonna
No, she said she didn't want to, she didn't think it was safe or it was good for us to see each other anymore that day, the rest of that day, just because of all that. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. Then she asked me to come over later on after she got back from her baseball game.
Well, this is very interesting. Chris Watts talks about 2 specific times when Nicole Kessinger comes over to his house. She also talks about those 2 specific times during her interview. So let's just take a comparison of what was said.
It's believable to me. Yes, I went to the house, and the first time I was there, I hung out in their front living room. I just sat on the floor, and it was on the 4th of July. It was the morning of the 4th, and I was helping him to set up MyFitnessPal app and track his food, his calories and stuff, because he does pretty good with the working out and stuff. And he asked me, he's like, can you help me just get this dialed in? It's yeah, I can do that. So that he invited me up to the house. And
I think it's important to note that it's clear from these 2 stories that she wasn't invited up to the house, but she just showed up at the house after she was upset because Chris Watts left her apartment that morning because he didn't want to be there when Shanann called again.
I was already kind of hesitant to do it because I was there are other people that live here, and I just felt like it was an invasion of space. And so I went up there, and we just stayed in that front room, and I helped him out with that, and got him all set up with that. And then Oh, he asked me if I wanted lunch, and he grilled chicken and carrots, and then that's all he had. And I was like, okay, so we ate, and then I left.
And so you did that. So what was the second one like?
It was basically about the same thing. She was, I didn't really know it at one point, but I guess she had set up a couple dates with like some eHarmony app or something, and they never showed up. And she'd already made plans with me, and
Wait, what do you mean? She set up dates when she had plans with you?
yeah,
Why would she do that?
I guess she kind of figured out they weren't going to show up. She went, I guess when she went to the baseball game, they never showed up, and there was another one and never showed up either.
So she's actively dating other people while you guys are together?
So a couple of weeks later.
And how'd you find out? What'd she say?
It was one conversation where I actually kind of fell asleep on the couch, and then like she had told me like I'm not sure why she even told me about it, but it was very random, and she could tell that it kind of like took me back a little bit because I figured she would have told me that if she was actively still like looking around. I mean, she didn't have to tell me, but I figured she.
Do you think she told you though so that it would hurry you up and
make a decision?
You're making a decision.
It might have been, but it's.
Just in regards to this bit about eHarmony, I just want to play you a little segment from Nicole Kessinger's first phone interview with Kevin Kobach, which was on the 17th of August, 2018, where she doesn't seem to know anything about eHarmony.
Couple things. So one, I went back and I tried to like find whatever text you were talking about between my friend Charlotte and me with the eHarmony thing, and I don't know what you're talking about.
Okay.
And let's listen to an excerpt of Nicole Kessinger's interview in person from August 16th, 2018, when she's talking about that same second time that she was at the Watts residence that you just heard Chris Watts speak about.
Second time I went to that house, I'm not sure what day it was, but it was the weekend of the 14th.
Of August? July?
I don't know if it was the 14th or the 15th. One of those 2 days. But we had went out and we stopped there just real quick on the way back. And we were there not very long. But that time I saw a picture of one of his kids. And I remember thinking to myself, like, wow, she's so beautiful. And I like took a step back and I was just like, this man has a gorgeous house. He has beautiful babies. He has a beautiful wife. He has an awesome job. Like, why would he want to leave this? And I remember talking to him about it. And that was the first time that I tried to actually say, what do you think about not separating from your wife? Like, what if you really try to work on this? And he had expressed to me that we've tried to work on this and it's not working. So that is why we're separating. And I spent some time, like, just, kind of, because it almost made me feel bad, where I was like to the point where I'm engaging in a relationship with a man who, the way he described it, is in a contractual agreement, but was not in like an emotional relationship with somebody. And for me, the way I would have preferred to do this is to have waited till that contractual agreement was also done, and he was done. And he could have approached me and said, I'm just had a divorce, maybe we could take this slow. What do you think? But instead it was, oh, we're separated and we're working on a divorce. And that is the part that I feel bad about, because I should have waited on that and I didn't. And, I was just like, well, they're already there. So, but then being in a house, I was just like, why? Fix this. Find a way to fix this. Make it work, and I was like trying to push him to do it. And he seemed pretty reluctant to do it. He didn't want to. And I don't know, we were still seeing each other fairly frequently, but I kind of like backed away so we weren't hanging out quite as much. And we were still close, but it was just like I really wanted him to try.
Such bullshit, such lies, such mischaracterizations and manipulation, as some of you had said. Oh my gosh. Cuff, thank you so much for the super chat. That's so kind and generous of you. She says, oh, Thank you for all your hard work and dedication, Kelly. Well, thank you so much, my friend. I really appreciate you and all you do for the channel and being part of the community. And thank you so much for the super chat and the support of the channel. Thank you. Thank you. Let's see. Yeah, that was her only regret, not waiting for the divorce. Oh my God. Right? Seriously. Let's see. There was a couple other I wanted to read. Give me just 1 second, guys. I'm just getting my bearings with the comments. There's a lot of great comments here. Oh yeah. So Lyrical Blue said Friday, August 11th. At first she said a man named Daniel stayed at her house, but this is a good point, and we're going to be talking more about this. It was Daniel Hadel, and that was the friend whose mother recently passed away, where Nicole Kessinger was caught on camera, that one that had come out kind of recently in Montana. It was Daniel's mother, Jessica, who had passed away. It was her funeral. But yes, it is true that Nicole Kessinger's friend Danielle stayed at her house that Friday night. In fact, there are some Venmo transactions and messages between them that looks like, you know, one of them is paying the other back for maybe a taxi ride and drinks, something of that nature. But we're going to actually get back to that. Let me move forward in this video a little more. Interview when he was interviewed from Dodge Correctional Facility in February of 2019. The no stops and told him that she actually had some dates with some dudes from eHarmony, but then she backed. Yeah, we don't need to listen to this right now. Let me just get
To her a little bit about Chris. I didn't tell her that I was like how deep the rabbit hole went on that, I guess you could say, but
now, okay. Let me swap videos here. And again, thank you guys for being here. Thank you for those to all of you. Please hit the like. If you're just coming in, welcome. We're so stoked you're here. And yeah, please hit that like and let us know what you think. If you're new to the chat, say hello. Let us know where you're from. We would love to get to know you a little better. So let's see. That's the one I just played. Okay, so now we're going to this one. All right, let me press play.
And even on Wednesday, I cut it short. Like, he came and hang out with me for a few hours, and then I was like, go chill with your kids.
Ready, set?
Go.
Ready, set?
Go.
So, in the time when Chris Watts returned home from North Carolina with his family the evening of August 7th, through the early morning of August 13th, when Shanann, Bella, Celeste, and Nico were murdered, Nicole saw Chris twice, she says, once on Wednesday and once on Saturday. Now, it's important to put their meeting on Wednesday in context. It's critical that we understand this. That Wednesday, August 8th, when Nicole Kessinger apparently cut it short, Chris Watts was home in Colorado with his family for the first time ever, apparently, in the history of their dating, according to them, on August 8th. He's there in Colorado, Nicole is there in Colorado, and for the first time, his wife and children are also home. That dynamic and that change in the environment that Chris and Nicole were living their fantasy relationship in must have caused a lot of pressure for each of them and for their relationship in general. It is important to note that Chris Watts was home with his family in Colorado, again, for the first time during the entire duration of his short 6-week relationship with Nicole Kessinger, for just under a week before his family was annihilated. It's also important to note that Shanann was only home on that Wednesday and Thursday, the 8th and the 9th, before she left for a Thrive Lavelle trip in Arizona at 4:30 a.m. early Friday morning. So that means during the relationship of Chris and Nicole, that 6-week-long relationship, Bella and Celeste were only there in Colorado with them, so to speak, just under a week. And Shanann was only in town for 2 days. Okay, so this again is another important point. Let me get to that little visual there, because again, I like to see things visually rather than just hearing them. Maybe you're like me. Let me know if you are. So with that, so during
Nicole Kessinger and Chris Watts' supposed 6-week-long relationship, get this, guys, of that whole 6 weeks, because Shanann and the girls were in North Carolina, Bella and Cece were only home, well, really, it's 5.5 days. And Shanann, during Chris Watts and Nicole Kessinger's entire relationship, was only home 2 of those days. Think about that. But it was so unacceptable to Nicole Kessinger that, he had to spend time with his family and take care of his children. This had to happen, and it had to happen now.
Them, so to speak, just under a week, and Shanann was only in town for 2 days. Knowing that makes statements that Nicole Kessinger said during her interviews with law enforcement so very curious. For example, this statement here.
Because he could pretty much call me whenever he wanted. I was the one that would tell him hey, when your kids are awake, you need to spend time with your kids. Do that. And then after they go to bed, if you want to talk to me, you can talk to me. But it was never this super, super restricted thing. Sometimes right after work, if I was still talking to him, I get kind of bummed out, and I tell him just oh, it's frustrating sometimes having to wait. But at the same time, I was never this is horrible, or it was always I'm just why.
So now that we know that the girls were only in town for 6 days during Chris and Nikki's entire relationship, and Shanann was only in town for 2 days, and Chris went to Nicole Kessinger's apartment right after work on Wednesday the 8th, that means there were only 2 days, that Thursday and Friday, when Nicole Kessinger would have had to have waited for Chris to call her after work to get all frustrated. But wait a minute. Chris and Nicole both took that Friday off of work. Listen carefully to Nicole Kessinger's response to interviewer Kevin Kovac when he asks about what Chris Watts did on.
Did you know that Nicole Kessinger and Chris Watts both took that Friday, the Friday before the murders, which happened in the early morning hours of Monday morning? They both were not at work that day. And again, yes, as Lyrica Blue said, that is also the night that Danielle Hadel, at least that night, stayed at Nicole Kessinger's house. Neil's son asked, did Danielle go to Lazy Dog on Saturday? That's a good question. Lyrica Blue is wondering, was Jim really at Nicole Kessinger's place over the weekend? Double, triple, quadruple penetration, whatever, wink, wink, wink. That's another good question.
On Sunday, she's being forgetful as usual, but pay careful attention to what she says.
Do you know what he did Sunday during the day?
I don't even know what I did on Sunday during the day. I am so tired. Let me just think about this. Daniel came over Friday. I hung out with him Saturday. And then Sunday.
When did Jim come in?
Monday.
Huh.
Jim got here Monday. What did I do on Sunday? I am drawing a blank. I'm really tired. I don't know. Can I get back to you on that?
It is absolutely no surprise that she cannot remember what she did on Sunday. After all, Sunday was the evening going into the early morning when the family annihilation happened. It's also the evening when the 111-minute phone call happened that neither Chris or Nicole Kessinger will reveal any details about. Of course, she doesn't ever remember anything about Sunday. But did you catch that? She said, Danielle came over on Friday. I hung out with him on Saturday. Danielle Hadel, her friend, was in town Friday evening and spent the night at her apartment Friday night. Maybe that's why she had taken Friday off.
So the 10th, you went to the Rockies game.
Yeah.
Okay.
I didn't see him that day. I was with my friends, and I stayed with me that night.
So now let's listen to Troy McCoy talking about meeting Chris Watts on the afternoon of Friday, August 11th. This is when Chris Watts gave Troy McCoy his Fire Stick to try to jailbreak it. Do you remember? Chris Watts was trying to save expenses of sports channels, and he was going to try to watch his sports through the Amazon Fire Stick, and that was the purpose of the meeting.
Okay, so let's let's cover some timeline stuff here.
Yes, sir.
So let's start with on Sunday. So Sunday would be the 12th.
Yes.
Did you talk to Chris at all on the 12th?
I didn't speak to him over the weekend. I seen him on Friday.
Seen him on Friday. So that was the last time you saw him before the work week.
Yes.
Okay.
I seen him on Friday, and he'd taken off Friday to take Shanann to the airport for Phoenix.
Okay.
And then he told me he wanted me to look at his Fire Stick that he bought. I said, okay. So
like TV Fire Stick?
Yeah,
okay.
Amazon Fire Stick.
Sure.
So before the workday ended on Friday, he's told me that he'd meet me at the Safeway parking lot there in Fort Lupton. And he showed up in their Lexus, and Bella and CC were in the back seat. So he jumped out, gave me the Fire Stick, and right after he gave me the Fire Stick, that's whenever Cody called. Cody Roberts, the operator of the Service 319, and said that he thought there was a leak in the bypass line.
And that's on 319, you said?
Yes, the Service 319.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, because that bypass line is now locked and tagged out because we done that Monday morning.
Okay. Oh, okay, so Bella
and CC.
And CC.
Yeah.
We're in the back seat.
Yes, sir.
And was Shanann?
No, sir.
Was she in the
already
front
taken
seat?
her to the airport.
You already took her there?
Yes.
Do you remember what time this was?
I'm look back to my text messages I gave you because he told me he was sitting by the 5.0. There was an orange Mustang sitting in the parking lot.
Okay.
I think it was one of the ladies that it looked just like the one I used to have. Okay. Because I had it red when I was telling you about that earlier.
Yeah.
So, and he's a huge Ford guy because he was a master mechanic.
Yeah, I remember he said something about that.
Sorry.
No problem.
Chris Watts. Okay, thanks. Forward your link. You just sent it there. Okay, right here. It's right here. It's at 3:05.
So we know from people being interviewed that Chris Watts told at least a few people that he had to take that Friday off so he could take Shanann to the airport, as Troy McCoy reported. We know that that is not the case. He did not take Shanann to the airport. Nicole Atkinson picked Shanann up from her home around 4:30 a.m. That is a well-known and documented fact. And the girls were going to daycare, or they had been going to daycare before they left for North Carolina. So it makes sense that maybe Chris wouldn't want to take them that day, but he could have. So we wonder, why did Chris Watts take off that day? And again, we have no idea why Nicole Kessinger did not go to work that day. They both report that they did not see one another that day. Do you believe that's true? Leave a comment below, letting us know what you think. Now, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on it, but many people have created theories about exactly what happened that created this tragedy that had to do with Chris Watts and Troy McCoy exchanging that Fire Stick. You see, their coworker, Cody Roberts, reported that there was a leak at Survey 319 while Chris and Troy were meeting in that parking lot that Troy was talking about. The timing is kind of ironic. Now, many people bring up this Fire Stick as being something suspicious. People who are proponents of the so-called explosion theory, some of them say that perhaps the Fire Stick was used as a detonation device. I personally do not believe that is the case because I don't believe in any kind of explosion theory, but I know that many of you think that there is a viable explosion theory, and I'd like to hear about it. So if you think that there is, please leave a comment down below letting me know what you think. Is there an explosion?
So just let me know in chat. Do you guys subscribe to any kind of explosion theory regarding this case? And if you're not familiar, don't worry about it. I'm not going to go into it. I personally don't think there's anything to an explosion theory, but I do want to know your opinions. This is something that makes some people that like this channel a lot really mad about me, that I don't buy into the explosion theory, but let me know what you think. I mean, I could be like Papa Roger or Brian Koberger, if you've been following the case with me. This is kind of an insider thing, and say, fight me, but convince me. I mean, I could be convinced of it. I just don't think that with what I know now, it doesn't make sense to me, but I want to know what you think. What do you think about a possible explosion theory?
Theory that is viable in this case?
Because like he could pretty much call me whenever he wanted. Like I was the one that would tell him like, hey, when your kids are awake, you need to spend time with your kids. Like do that. And then after they go to bed, like if you want to talk to me, you can talk to me. But it was never like this super restricted thing. Like sometimes like right after work, if I was like still talking to him, I get kind of bummed out, and I tell him, just like, oh, it's frustrating sometimes, like having to like wait.
Considering that
Chris Watts and Nicole Kessinger both took Friday off. So Nicole Kessinger wasn't having to wait around after work, impatiently getting anxious for Chris Watts to call her.
Like, he could pretty much call me whenever he wanted. Like, I was the one that would tell him, like, hey, when your kids are awake, you need to spend time with your kids. Like, do that. And then after they go to bed, like, if you want to talk to me, you can talk to me. But it was never like this super, super restricted thing. Like, sometimes, like, right after work, if I was, like, still talking to him, I get kind of bummed out. And I tell him, just like, oh, it's frustrating sometimes, like, having to, like, wait. But at the same time, I was never like, this is horrible, or, it was always like, I understood why.
Now remember, she's saying, remember, we just determined that the girls were only in Colorado at home for 5.5 days of that 6 weeks that they supposedly dated. Shanann was only there 2 days, but yet still was like, Nicole Kessinger's like, yeah, sometimes, when, I'd have to wait because he's spending time with his girls, I'd be frustrated, but I would just be like, dude, it was only 5.5 days of your freaking relationship. Come on, man. I mean, this just says something about her temperament, her tolerance, and her tolerance for her lover having a family and having children, having obligations, responsibilities, and things in his life that are not her. Now, Halsey, because I just asked you guys about the explosion theory, what you think or not, says, let's see, can't see this. Sorry. He took the fuel cans with him, and some of you mentioned that as well. That is the one thing that makes me think, okay, maybe explosion theory. Again, like I said, I'm not sold on it, but I do wonder, we see him put those gas cans in the truck, and I made a video. I'm telling you, when he goes from his truck, turns to the garage, and then turns back and has a gas can in hand, we did a timing analysis and everything. We looked at the video, the surveillance or the body cam video of the inside of that garage. There is nothing inside that garage where there's a shelf or a hook or anything that could have held a gas can. And he didn't pick down to get it. He just grabbed it super quick in like 0.4 seconds, turned right around and had it in his hand. It is my opinion that somebody had to have handed him that gas can. But I digress a little bit here. But I just did want to, point out, I get it. The gas cans, that's weird. And additionally, someone handed him that gas can.
So it was really only one day. So that one day of Nicole Kessinger having to wait a little while for Chris Watts to call her after work because he was with his children must have made a real impression on her. And I don't think that this point can be overstated because Nicole Kessinger talks about that frustration she felt when she couldn't have Chris's attention right away after work. But we know because Shanann and the girls were gone for almost their entire relationship, except for the week before their murders. And we determined that of those days, Shanann was only home 2 of them, and the girls were only home 6 of them. And it was only on one of those days did Nicole Kessinger go to work when she didn't see Chris Watts right after work. But she made a point in her interview of saying, hey, sometimes after work.
Like, sometimes, like, right after work, if I was, like, still talking to him, I get kind of bummed out. And I tell him, just like, oh, it's frustrating sometimes, like, having to, like, wait. But at the same time, I was never like, this is horrible, or, it was always like, I understood why.
But remember, Nicole Kessinger cannot recall when Shanann and Chris got back from North Carolina, even though it was just 8 days prior to this August 16th interview. And I bet among those of us who are familiar with the discovery, Nicole Kessinger's behavior, who Google searches, and her interactions with Chris Watts, and even the way she talks about him, know that she was no doubt counting down the days till that man touched down at the Denver airport and was on his way back into his mistress's arms. I wonder why she won't admit to knowing when they returned home.
And then it was like, we're filing for divorce, we're selling the house. And this was like all as soon as they were coming back from North Carolina, like boom, 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 boom.
Would you recall when he gets back from North Carolina?
No, I don't even know how long he was out there. I know it was like less than 2 weeks and more than 1.
Okay.
I don't remember.
So remember, the Watts family returns home from North Carolina the evening of August 7th. Wednesday, August 8th, we're going to talk about that day right here. And then that's one of the days that Shanann is actually home. One of the 2 days she's home during the course of Chris Watts and Nicole Kessinger's relationship. She's also home that Thursday, and then she leaves for Arizona in the early morning hours of Friday, the 10th. On that ever important Wednesday, August 8th, the first day the family was back in Colorado, he goes to work on that day, but right after work, we know from his geotab information that he drives right over to Nicole Kessinger's apartment immediately after work. I always wonder how Chris Watts got away with this, so to speak. We know that he was a creature of habit. As was Shanann. Their family had a very strict routine, and Chris was generally home between 3:30 and 4. So I wonder how Chris got away with going to Nicole Kessinger's house for hours after work on that very first day they were home from North Carolina without Shanann giving him a hard time. So on that Wednesday, August 8th, the first full day the Watts family was home, he stays there until 6 p.m., which just gives him enough time to leave her apartment, go pick up Shanann, and arrive at the ultrasound appointment to find out the gender of the baby that was scheduled for 7:30 p.m. that evening. Now, Shanann Watts was over the moon because Chris agreed to attend that ultrasound appointment with her. We know that August 8th was a big day for Shanann Watts. It also turned out to be a critical day for the relationship of Nicole Kessinger and Chris Watts. Here's a brief summary of the many important events that happened on that day. I do want to note that I detailed all of the events of this very important day in the history of this tragedy in the original ultimatum video, which is linked in the description below. All of Shanann's text messages between herself and her friends during the time when she was concerned about Chris's behavior in their relationship are documented in the investigative discovery. So if Shanann was suspicious about what he was doing after work that day, she would certainly have discussed it with one of her friends, and it wouldn't have appeared in the discovery. Listen to her best friend, Christina Meacham, talking about the routine nature of Shanann Watts' personality and the Watts family's life.
I mean, like when Nikki went by the house, things didn't make sense to me at all because it just, she said routine. She said routine, like she's OCD. She has everything in order. She literally has a plan for everything. She's not a person to derive from those plans. Like, this is what she's going to do. This is what's going to happen. The kids have times they go to take naps. They, things go a certain way. She has a routine. Even what she wears, even the flip-flops that she wears, is a routine for her.
I wonder what Chris told Shanann about what he was doing after work on that day. We know from the investigative discovery that just 2 minutes after arriving at Nicole Kessinger's apartment, he modified Shanann Watts.
So these are all things that happened on August 8th. So this is part of the focus of this video, what a pivotal day that was. And here's a list. Hold it. I'm going to have to just play that.
This is what she's going to do. This is what's going to happen. The kids have times they go to take naps. They, things go a certain way. She's had.
I just posted a video with Christina Meacham's interview with law enforcement and also Addie Maloney's and some other information in there. If you guys haven't seen it, I just dropped it yesterday, maybe.
Has a routine. Even what she wears, even the flip-flops that she wears, is a routine for her.
I wonder what Chris told Shanann about what he was doing after work on that day. We know.
So all of this happened on August 8th. The ultrasound had been scheduled for that evening, and it did happen that evening at 7 p.m., which is really kind of a bizarre time for an ultrasound, but okay. Chris Watts went to Nicole Kessinger's apartment right after work. There's geotab location information telling us so. He stayed there till 6 p.m. That was just enough time for him to leave there, go home and get Shanann, and make it to that ultrasound appointment at 7. As soon as Chris Watts parks at Nicole Kessinger's apartment complex, he modifies Shanann's contact information in his phone. I think this might be because he didn't tell Nicole Kessinger that he had to leave that night, even though she says she kicked him out. Bullshit. He didn't want to tell Nicole Kessinger he was going to an ultrasound appointment with his wife. So, thinking that Chanel would be texting or calling, he didn't want Kessinger to see that. Watts also deletes his Facebook account on that day. This is all on August 8th. Oh yeah, and by the way, if you're listening, what is that? The something room that ripped off all of this material from me. Don't bother. We're on to you. Also, Chris Watts got a key to Nicole Kessinger's apartment on August 8th. This is all on August 8th. Kessinger gave Chris a key to her apartment. And also on August 8th, shortly after Chris Watts leaves her house that evening and Chris is at the ultrasound with his wife, Nicole Kessinger Googles the term marrying your mistress. Damn. It's a busy day.
From the investigative discovery that just 2 minutes after arriving at Nicole Kessinger's apartment,
he modified Shanann Watts' contact information in his phone.
I have to surmise that he was changing the contact name so it didn't say Shanann Watts or whatever he called her in his contact list, but rather something else. Although we know that Nicole Kessinger knew that Shanann Watts was pregnant with Chris's child, I doubt that he wanted to tell his mistress that he had to leave at a certain time because he had to go check out to attend an ultrasound appointment with his wife to find out the sex of their baby to be. Yeah, I don't think so. I'm pretty sure that's what he did.
We know that he stays there for several hours at Nicole Kessinger's apartment and leaves right around 6 o'clock. He stays just up until the time when he would need to leave to be able to go get Shanann and make it to the ultrasound appointment at 7:30 p.m. on time. So he's there for about 3 hours. Also on that day, while Chris is at Nicole Kessinger's apartment, Nicole Kessinger gives Chris Watts a key to her apartment.
One of the confessions that Chris Watts makes in his letters from Christopher, the compilation book by Sherilyn Cadle, is that when Nicole Kessinger gave him a key to her apartment, he felt like it made their relationship official, that she was very serious about him and their future together.
Shortly after Chris Watts leaves Miss Kessinger's apartment that evening, Miss Kessinger Googles for the first time something as explicit as this statement, literally verbatim, quote, marrying your mistress. We certainly know what's on Nicole Kessinger's mind when Chris Watts leaves her apartment on that day.
We also know on that day that Chris Watts deletes his Facebook account. We know this because Dave.
I just want to mention, I know I used to, just let people in chat mention other channels, on panel mention other channels, and we do mention other channels and certainly give people credit where credit is due and just give people props because they stop by or because we're talking about them or whatever. I have no problem doing that. I'm not like I need everything to be about me and watch my channel and no one else. I think, there's tons of people watching true crime interested in this case and all others, and there's tons of views on YouTube to go around, and I just believe in playing forward and back and every which way. But due to some things that have happened recently, I don't want to mention channels specifically in chat right now. I just do want to say that I'm not trying to be a jerk, but I see that some people are talking about some things, so thank you guys for respecting that.
Dave Baumhover asked him about this in the jailhouse interview. And also, Shanann asked Chris about this through text, and he and his father, Ronnie, also discussed the deletion of his Facebook account through text messages. He tells Dave Baumhover that the reason he deleted his Facebook account is because he just learned that Nikki told her friends about him, and he didn't want them to look him up and see that his wife was pregnant. Everything was moving very quickly for Chris and Nikki after the family returned back to Colorado from North Carolina. She gives him a key to her apartment, and it makes sense to me that it was during that time while Chris and Nikki were at her apartment after work that day that they discussed that Nicole had told her friends about Chris. And while we do know that there is some truth to that Nicole Kessinger was apparently telling her friends about Chris, we know from the discovery and from Nicole Kessinger's interviews that she had a text conversation with her best friend, Charlotte Nelson, about Chris Watts, her new romantic interest, this guy that she's so into. She's Googling marrying your mistress and looking for wedding dresses online for hours. She told Charlotte about Chris once, and that date was August 12th, 2018. That's right, Sunday, August 12th, 2018. The day before, just hours before, Chris Watts' family was annihilated. Is that coincidental timing or what? I mean, did she tell her very best friend about her new lover for the first time just hours before the murders because she knew that things were going to be free and clear and she and Chris could really be together? Or is it just, timing that happened to be that way? Leave a comment down below letting us know what you think about that. Nicole Kessinger telling her best friend about Chris Watts just hours before the murders.
All right, guys. So let's shift back over to Nicole Kessinger's recollection. I'm getting a bunch of texts and stuff, mostly from you guys, but I do want to just let you know, could a moderator please put this in chat? So Kathleen Hutson's new upcoming book about the Watts case is called Girls of Summer. She's actually, Girls of Summer refers to Nicole Kessinger, Casey Anthony, and Jodi Arias, all who were involved in horrific crimes during the summertime. But the book is called Girls of Summer. I just got a text from her. So if a moderator could please put that in chat, that would be awesome. I just all of a sudden have so much stuff going on, but thank you guys so much for doing that. Now, I just want to read a few comments because I did ask you about the explosion theory and you guys responded. So I want to give you the courtesy of talking about that. Let's see. Oops. So local jazz hands. So, and again, I don't buy into the explosion theory, but I mean, I'm not totally opposed to it. I've heard so many people try to make the case for it, and I don't get there. The one thing I do question is, Chris Watts putting the gas can in his truck, and as I said, I made a video about it. I'll try to find the link to it, or maybe we can watch it super quick. I think I have proven, all but proven in the true sense of the word, that somebody handed him that gas can. We look at the timing, that there was no one where in the garage. It could have been holding a gas can, et cetera, et cetera. So, someone handed him that gas can he put in his truck. Local Jazz Hands also says, and that lighter on the passenger side, I think he was considering burning them. Ooh, yikes. I wasn't ready for that. But how obvious would that be? I think they were leaving options open. I think he and maybe dug the hole before the tragedy happened. Colleen Casey said, yes, they all knew the Anadarko was being sold and last chance to make huge money, right? As Anflax has pointed out, is being sold to Occidental, I think in a matter of weeks, months at the most, but I think weeks. I think Chris Watts got to get rid of Shanann Watts and split settlement with other employees. That's why so many stories don't add up, okay? Then Chad Meyer says, NK can pass for Shanann Watts. And somebody else said Charlotte, her friend could, but I think you mean Danielle, because Danielle's the one that looks very much like Shanann. And she was the one that was at Nicole Kessinger's apartment that weekend. But Chad says Nicole Kessinger could pass for Shanann if she put on a hat and sunglasses, or Danielle could. Somebody else mentioned that. She was going to take the Lexus and be seen on the security camera leaving the house. Yes, I do know a lot of people do think that's part of the explosion theories. This is from a while ago, but Laura Grabowski says, I feel like Nicole Kessinger watched Shanann Watts' lives and mocked her and thrived people for not being in shape. I think she did too. I think she was really nasty about it, and joke's on her because she's definitely not in good shape now. We've seen her. We can certainly say that is a fact. Yes, and again, Kathleen Hutson, my friend Kathleen Hutson's book that will be coming out in just like a week and a half, hopefully, on the Watts case and some information that we learned through our intense research and our team efforts and investigation. It's going to be disclosed in that book, and it's called Girls of Summer. Thank you, Pepper, and anyone else that put that up for me. Okay, and yeah, a lot of people are just not sure about the explosion theory, and yeah. Oh yeah, you can. Hey, Crafted Evidence, drop a link for which thing, my friend? You're good at grabbing those links. Yeah, I mean, if you can, any of the things I talked about, if you can grab a link and drop it, that would be amazing.
All right, I'm gonna keep playing this video. Thanks for being here, guys. Everybody, please take a moment, hit like. And I feel so silly always asking that, but you know how YouTube works. It helps the algorithm, keeps channels alive, so we can all survive. Unlike poor Shanann, Cece, and Nicole, no, not Nicole Kessinger, and Bella, thanks largely in part to this woman.
Of the days before the murders, the week before the murders, the time before the murders, since the Watts family returned from North Carolina back to Colorado, and also her selective memory and her prioritization to put emphasis on the sale of that house, 2825 Saratoga Trail, as Chris Watts heads towards picking up the keys in her mind to his new apartment for him and the girls, or maybe him and the girls and Nichol Kessinger.
Then it was like, we're filing for divorce, we're selling the house. And this was like all as soon as they were coming back from North Carolina, like boom, 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 boom.
Would you recall when he gets back from North Carolina?
No, I don't even know how long he was out there. I know it was like less than 2 weeks and more than one.
Okay.
I don't remember. I really wanted them to fix it. I would have just like left the situation. I knew he told me like we were going to put the house up, but they said he was like, we didn't know how much to offer for it, and we were kind of trying to find somebody. And it like, so for the first few weeks that I hung out with him, he kind of like dragged his feet on, hey, this is happening. And then after North Carolina, he's like, yeah, she wants to put the house up. She's the one that called the realtor. And I was like kind of taken back, not necessarily at the speed of it, given how long he said that they've been separating, but the fact that she did it like the day after he supposedly sat down and had a conversation with her about, hey, do we fix this or do we not fix this relationship?
So do you remember how many days she was back in Colorado before leaving? Do you know that?
Because I don't remember when they got home.
Right.
I don't.
Here we go. Once again, of course, she cannot remember. Well, don't worry, Miss Kessinger. We here at What's the Obsession have done the math for you. During the entire duration of your 6-week relationship with Chris Watts, Shanann was only home in Colorado a total of 2 days, not even.
This was, they get home, he had told you in North Carolina that they agreed to and they're finalized their relationship.
Yeah.
They get home and she immediately wants to sell the house.
Yes. And then, so, I mean, I started thinking, okay, well, I know in Colorado houses sell very fast here. So I was like, what's your plan? You know, and I was like, because you might want to be prepared. And I remember that's when the whole concept came up of, you probably need to start looking for a new place pretty quick. And that was when he was kind of overwhelmed with it. And I told him, I was like, look, like I just moved a few months ago. I was like, to find a place that was comfortable for me, it was like, it took like a lot of research. And that's when I offered to help. I was like, I'll help you. And he seemed pretty gung-ho about it for like the first week. And he seemed very grateful. And I was putting in work on it. And I was like calling him and kind of letting him know about places. And there really wasn't that many options in Brighton. I found one. I actually texted it to myself before I texted it to him because I was going, I still have that in my phone too. Because I found it and it was great, but it was like right at the beginning of my search. And I was like, I don't want to inundate him.
So you said a week. Do you think you worked on that for a week?
No, I honestly only probably spent like a few hours over a few days and just trying to like line it up.
Just trying to think about how many days she had been back while you were working on that. Do you know what I'm saying?
Oh.
So you said, did you actually work on it for a week straight?
No. Okay. It was just like a couple days after work. I would just like spend a couple hours if I had time, like at the end of my day, or if I didn't go to the gym, and just sit down. And I mean, I can give you a date on one that I worked on because I texted that one to myself.
Okay, now pay very careful attention to the next thing that she is about to say here.
I mean, I can give you a date on one that I worked on because I texted that one to myself. This one, I love this one. When is this? Saturday, August 11th.
That's the night you guys went out?
Yeah.
To the lazy dog.
Yes.
Or the two lazy dogs.
Did you catch that? Oh, I can give you a date here. I text the listing to myself, and it's the date is August 11th. The silence is deafening. Silence like we have not yet heard from Chris Watts' mistress before, after she says, oh, it was August 11th. All of a sudden, she's speechless because law enforcement is not supposed to know what was really being discussed at dinner that evening. They're just supposed to believe that the entire time Kessinger and Watts were talking about Chris Watts' diet and macros.
I can give you a date on one that I worked on because I texted that one to myself. This one, I loved this one. When is this? Saturday, August 11th.
That's the night you guys went out?
Yeah.
To the lazy dog.
Yes.
Or the two lazy dogs.
Okay, so this little sound excerpt that I'm playing here is 35 minutes into the 2-hour and 20-minute final interview between Nicole Kessinger and Kevin Kobach. Now, up until this point, all that she has told Kevin Kobach about what they had discussed at the Lazy Dog that Saturday night, just about a day and a half before the murders, was Chris Watts' diet, his macros, dialing them in when she is asked about their date at the Lazy Dog restaurant on Saturday, August 11th.
Saturday, during your dinner, what kind of conversation did you guys have?
I don't even.
The question is, Saturday during your dinner, what kind of conversation did you have? And let's just look at her response, her reaction again. Again, we have a moment of silence, very rare for this mistress.
During your dinner, what kind of conversation did you guys have?
I don't even remember. Oh. I don't even remember. Oh.
She clearly does not want to answer that question. She's not.
You guys catch that? Let me just go back again because she just like, I think it's so clear how badly she does not want to answer this question.
What kind of conversation did you guys have?
I don't even.
The question is, Saturday during your dinner, what kind of conversation did you have? And let's just look at her response, her reaction again. Again, we have a moment of silence, very rare for this mistress.
During your dinner, what kind of conversation did you guys have?
I don't even remember. Oh. I don't even remember. Oh.
She clearly does not want to answer that question. She's not willing to answer the question. What was the conversation when you guys were out at the Lazy Dog restaurant? She has selective memory about so many things throughout the hours upon hours of all of her 5 interviews. You know, right here, we're talking about not knowing when the family got home from North Carolina back to Colorado, even though it was just a week before this interview, right? And then to say that she doesn't know what they talked about at the Lazy Dog restaurant or act like she doesn't remember. It was 4 days before this interview. Of course she remembers. Of course she remembers these things because she remembers the details about so many insignificant things. So we have to ask the question, why is Nicole Kessinger, Chris Watts' mistress, lying to law enforcement? Now, it's one thing to have selective memory about just random things, but here she's being directly questioned about recent events pertaining to the murders of a 15-week-old pregnant woman and her 2 baby girls. Oh, by the way, the person who killed them, perhaps with the help of another, is her boyfriend. And this woman gets off without any hard questions, with no charges, although from what we already know about what she did, she should have been charged. She has no penalties, no consequences or repercussions. Law enforcement completely let her off the hook. And we have to ask,
Saturday during your dinner, what kind of conversation did you guys have?
I don't even remember. Oh, so he's been trying to like eat a little healthier than he normally does. And he's always like been in the working out since I knew him, and he like tries to eat clean, but he was trying to like step it up a little bit. And nothing like the people who do like the competitions and the shows that are all super restrictive. And it's nothing like that. It's just like day-to-day general maintenance.
Wait. What did she just say?
The people who do like the competitions and the shows that are all super restrictive.
Yeah, the people that do the competitions and the shows that are all super restrictive and stuff, you know, like the professional bodybuilders. Like, what is she talking about? It's crap like this, ramblings like this, complete nonsensical, irrelevant. What the hell are you talking about, girl? Stuff like this that she spews for the whole 9 hours of interviews that she does over those 5 interviews that lets us know she has no interest in helping this investigation and no interest in telling the truth. Why is that?
There's nothing like that. It's just like day-to-day general maintenance. But it's how I eat, and it's pretty healthy. And he's been losing a lot of weight. He lost, I want to say like 13 pounds in the time that we were hanging out. And honestly, when you start eating a little bit cleaner and you start working out a little bit harder, the first couple months, especially for a man, because they lose weight faster, it's not something that's like that drastic to me, but it did stand out that it was like a little much. And so I was like, whoa, like maybe.
Seriously, guys, I'm sorry that you are listening to this in my video right now, but I'm going to speed it up here. We're going to listen to it on double time, so you can do it really fast. But I think it's important to understand how long she was talking about absolutely nothing, not answering the question that was asked. Well, because she's lying. And I mean, who would really think that this answer is genuine? And how Kevin Kobach just patiently waits for her to finish with her diatribe and then says, okay, so that was, the bulk of your conversation, all this shit that you're telling me now, the macronutrients. She's like, yeah. It's important. What does she not want to talk about that was discussed at dinner when they were at the Lazy Dog, or what happened that evening that she doesn't want law enforcement to know about?
So let me look at them. So he had been working on my MyFitnessPal app and like programming like all stuff he eats. And I just started going through them and I was like trying to figure out like where his ratios were. And we actually spent a lot of time doing that because he'd asked me to do it for him. Because I just was at the point where I was like, if his weight loss slows down in a few weeks, he'll be fine. And if it doesn't, then his macros are a little off. It's not like that big of a deal. Like in the workout community, this is like a very normal thing. But
do you have any other outside concerns like potential drug use, alcohol use, any of that stuff that led you to go, oh, he's lost an extreme amount of weight in such a short period of time?
No, and I wouldn't call it extreme. It was just like, it was a lot. But I mean, when I first started working out, I dropped like 12 pounds in 2 weeks when I first started like hitting it hard with the diet. So the fact that he lost like that much weight, it wasn't, like I said, it was not a surprising amount. I just didn't want it to be like a sustained amount. But no, I didn't think anything weird of it just because of like how interknitted I am with the like workout community. And I know like this is possible, but it just, the thing that concerned me about it, I guess, and it wasn't even concerned, but the thing that like kind of red lighted me like, hey, this might be carrying on is the fact that his macros were like pretty dialed in. Like I wrote them and he like didn't stay exactly on them, but his calorie intake was about where it needed to be, my experience anyways, for like what he was trying to achieve. And so I don't know, he didn't seem to have a problem with it. He liked where he was at with all of that.
So that was your main conversation Saturday?
That was like a big chunk while we were there, is like us actually going through, because I was like going through each item, like, why are your ratios off?
Do you know where his kids or wife were that night?
Good old Kessinger using a technique she is comfortable with when she does not want to answer a question, when she wants to obfuscate, confuse, and redirect whoever she's speaking with. And that is to just ramble on about bullshit that has no consequence or meaning for anything that they should be talking about right now. One of the primary signs that somebody is telling a lie in their narrative story, or if they're being asked questions, is that what they say does not match the question asked. And this happens through all of the 5 interviews, almost 9 hours of interviews with Nicole Kessinger as it relates to this tragedy. So the comfortable conversation that Nicole Kessinger just defaulted to when Kevin Kobach asked her about, hey, what did you guys talk about at the Lazy Dog, is, the fitness app and the workouts and the dialing it in and the macros and the diet and how she helped Chris Watts. And if that sounds a little familiar to you and you hadn't heard those words verbatim before, it might be because another time when Nicole Kessinger does not want to tell law enforcement what she was up to or what was said, she defaulted to talking about helping Chris Watts out with his fitness app.
I think this is a really interesting point that she goes to these like similar topics when she wants to avoid, answering a certain question. I think this is super interesting. And this is a technique that compulsive liars certainly do use.
Good with working out, but he needs to dial it in with the macros and the diet. And that was when she ended up at his house on the morning of the 4th of July after he left her apartment because Shanann was freaking out because she couldn't get a hold of him and she was pissed. She just shows up on his doorstep. This is just a few days after they started dating.
I just sat on the floor, and it was on the 4th of July. It was the morning of the 4th, and I was helping him to set up MyFitnessPal app and like track his food, his calories and stuff, because he does pretty good with the working out and stuff. And he asked me, he's like, "Can you help me just like get this dialed in?" It's like, "Yeah, I can do that." So that he invited me up to the house, and I was already kind of hesitant to do it because I was like, there are other people that live here, and I just felt like it was an invasion of space.
It takes one special kind of personality to talk about such meaningless, self-involved crap and show no concern for the victims under these circumstances, and all the while lying her way through this nearly 4-hour interview. Lies, lies, lies. Now, although Nicole Kessinger had certainly mentioned Chris Watts getting an apartment, moving out of the house and getting an apartment of his own, and her helping him with those efforts before this, what I consider to be a slip, when she says, "Oh, well, the day I texted to myself, it was August 11th. Crickets, like we've never heard from her before, because I don't think he was supposed to know. I don't think that law enforcement was supposed to know about the heat that Nicole Kessinger was putting on Chris in that week, in those days, in those hours leading up to the family annihilation. The high pressure that she was applying for him to make a move and make it now. And most of all, the ultimatum that she laid down before him just days and hours before Shanann, 15 weeks pregnant, Bella, and Celeste were murdered. Now, this is just one piece of the puzzle that lets us know that there was, in fact, an ultimatum delivered from Nicole Kessinger to Chris Watts. But I want you to just take note here and put a bookmark in it that this is, in fact, a piece of that puzzle we're going to refer back to. All right, go get yourself a glass of water, a glass of wine, or a cup of coffee, but get ready to pay attention. The following excerpts are going to cover a pivotal, compelling 20-minute span of Nicole Kessinger's interview from August 16th, 2018, the one where her dad was present. Again, it's just going to be excerpts, but I need you to listen carefully. Oh, and we're going to start out when Nicole Kessinger is talking all about those macros when she is asked about their date at the Lazy Dog restaurant on Saturday, August 11th.
Saturday, during your dinner, what kind of conversation did you guys have?
So just like Nicole Kessinger did not want to tell law enforcement that she had a tantrum on the 4th of July and showed up at Chris Watts' house and all of the rest, she didn't want to tell law enforcement what she and Chris talked about at the Lazy Dog, because it had very much to do with Chris Watts' relationship with his wife, again, just like it did on the morning of the 4th of July when Shanann wanted Chris to answer the phone immediately and was questioning him because he wasn't. And he responded to that, and that upset his mistress. Something was going on with Shanann and Chris that weekend of the Lazy Dog date. And on August 11th, just before the murders, they had Nicole feeling very uncomfortable about Chris and Shanann's relationship. She was freaking out, throwing a tantrum, needed things to be her way, making demands, telling Chris how it was going to be, pushing him around, berating and belittling Shanann, and caring about no one other than herself.
Do you know where his kids or wife were that night?
On Saturday?
Yeah, his kid. Well, you know his kids are with the babysitter. Do you know where his wife is?
She's in Arizona.
Okay. How do you know that?
Because he told me.
Okay. Do you know what she's doing there?
I think she's on a business trip. He didn't even tell me right away. He actually told me, I think, like on Saturday or something. It might have been like Friday or something. I honestly don't remember. I just remember I was like really surprised where he's like, "Hey, like, I'm going to try to get a babysitter if you want to hang out," or something like that. And I was like, "Why do you need a babysitter? Like, your wife's home." He's like, "No, she's out of town." I was like, "Oh,
okay. Is there much conversation regarding?
And check out the body language from Miss Kessinger.
I just asked him what time she was coming home on Sunday, and he just said really late.
Okay.
And that was it. I mean, there's nothing really to talk about with that.
And she ends by saying, when he's asked if they talked about Shanann, yeah, well, there's nothing really to talk about with that. Wow. Remember, again, Shanann Watts' remains were just recovered hours before this interview. And for people who wonder why the world can't stand Nicole Kessinger, here is a shining, well, really, a dimming example.
Not really. I just asked him what time she was coming home on Sunday, and he just said really late.
Okay.
And that was it. I mean, there's nothing really to talk about with that.
Okay. So your conversation's mainly health related.
Mm-hmm.
You guys return to your house, and then he goes home, and then you talk to him for a few hours on Sunday.
All right. This is Kevin Kobach's first attempt at taking a crack at trying to discover what that 111-minute phone conversation was about that happened literally just a few mere hours, 2, 3, 4, 5 hours before Chris Watts' family was murdered. Now, something you might find interesting, how many times did Kevin Kobach ask her about what was discussed during that 111-minute phone conversation on Sunday, just hours before the murders? You know how many times he asked her about that phone call? I can tell you it was at least 8 times. I counted 8 times, 8 significant times where he asked her directly or tried to follow up and really tried to get an answer from her. And did she give him any meaningful?
Actually, it was 9 significant asks. 9.
Information or truth about the 111-minute phone call? Any of those 8 at least times he asked her directly about what was up that phone call? Like, it was long, weird timing. It was the longest phone call in her 3 months of phone records that they obtained per the discovery by far. The second longest phone call on her phone records was only 52 minutes. At 111 minutes, it was significantly longer, significantly closer to the time of the murders of Shanann, Bella, and Celeste than any other phone call. And you know what else? You may have heard me talk about this before in one of my phone data videos. On her phone bill, the 111-minute phone conversation is right next to the 6:16 a.m. phone ping that happened right outside the Watts house. That's right. No other activity happened on Nicole Kessinger's phone between that 111-minute phone conversation just hours before the murders and her 6:16 a.m. ping right in front of the Watts house that would have happened just hours, minutes, moments after the murders.
So I think that's another important point I just want to highlight. On her, as far as her phone activity goes, these two events are next to one another chronologically. Nothing happened between them as far as her phone activity. The end of the 111-minute phone conversation, and there's a whole lot around that that's interesting. We talked about that during the last live stream. We talk about it again and again and again. It's all really important stuff. And then the 6:16 a.m. phone ping. From the end of the 111-minute phone conversation to when her phone pinged in Frederick, Colorado at 6:16 a.m., there was no other activity on her phone. That's important.
Oh, man, like how was she not interrogated and investigated heavily?
And then you talked to him for a few hours on Sunday.
Did I? Are you asking me or are you
I'm
telling
asking
me?
you.
Oh, I was like, I don't even know. Someday, honestly, so wait a minute. That was Saturday. We're talking about Saturday. We're not talking about Sunday right now.
This is a dimming example of one of the travesties of the dynamic of this interview. That Nicole Kessinger is allowed to just lead him all over the place in whichever direction she wants to go. He asked about the 111-minute phone conversation on Sunday. She's just like, wait a minute. We're on Saturday. Well, there's nothing more to talk about on Saturday. Nothing else happened unless she wants to mention her Google search for Shanann Watts, Chris Watts, Ronnie Watts, and 2825 Saratoga Trail that happened 2 minutes after Chris Watts left her apartment at 10:02 p.m. after their dinner at the Lazy Dog that Saturday evening. Aside from that, nothing else happened, apparently. Since most of you have already listened to many of the Nicole Kessinger interviews, and specifically the one from August 16th, one where her dad is present, I'm just going to tell you that as he asks her, as Kevin Kobach asks Nicole Kessinger about the 111-minute phone conversation, she successfully detours him for about 10 minutes, going off about Nutgate, talking about CeCe Watts' apparent tree nut allergy and the fight that Shanann and Cindy Watts got into as a result while they were in North Carolina on July 9th. You guys probably know a whole lot about that whole situation. And if you don't, I have plenty of videos created about Nutgate on my channel. She just talks and talks and talks and talks and talks and talks and talks in circles and really doesn't get anywhere. So finally, Kevin Kobach cuts her off about that and tries again to redirect her. So after successfully ending the tangent Nicole Kessinger was taking him on about the tree nut allergies and the Nutgate argument between Shanann and Cindy Watts, he's going to go back to trying to question her about the 111-minute phone conversation. What I'm thinking is he's realizing that's probably not a good idea to try to launch right back into, because she's already on alert that he's trying to probe around about it and she is being defensive and evasive. So he just asks her about the nature of their relationship, of her relationship with Chris Watts while they were dating for the apparent 6 weeks that they were together. Nicole Kessinger talks about their affection for one another and saying, I love you. And there's that weird story about how he said, I love you to her while he was in North Carolina. And she said, well, hear it from her yourself.
I was like, don't say that to me. Like, please go try to fit. And I mean, and that might even be in the text too, where it's like, don't say those words to me and then go wife and lay in bed with another woman. Like, just don't do that.
Wow. As a side note, I wonder if her dad is impressed at all at what comes out of Nicole Kessinger's mouth.
I mean, the nerve for her to say that. Don't say you love me and then go lay in bed with another woman. Dude, that woman is his wife, bitch. Get out the way, bitch. It's his wife. I just can't even believe those words came out of her mouth.
During this interview, he just sits there. What is going through his head? Or is he just used to this crap? Okay, as we start to move towards talking about the moment, the event, the thing that made Nicole Kessinger snap, that pushed her over the edge and caused her to deliver the ultimatum to Chris Watts, it's me or your family. I just want to point out a couple things about that little excerpt that we just heard about Nicole Kessinger saying, oh, don't say I love you and don't go lay in bed with another woman. So gross, right? First of all, I think we see time and time again the complete lack of compassion that Kessinger has for Shanann Watts. I mean, for God's sake, she doesn't even care that the woman was just murdered. She certainly doesn't care about the relationship dynamics that were going on between Chris and Shanann, who had been together for years and years and years and years while they were in North Carolina. All she really wants is to be with Chris Watts obsessively, and God knows why. But I mean, that's where this woman is at. Also, this is just one example of the many examples where you see a clear display of contempt and disgust for Shanann Watts. And these are the ugliest human emotions that we feel towards another person. And when people are feeling contempt, disdain, or disgust for someone, there is really almost a necessary hatred for that person. And also those feelings in and of themselves are so uncomfortable because they are so ugly and intense to hold inside that people will usually do just about anything to eventually escape that feeling, including irrational things. So when Chris Watts says, I love you to Kessinger when he's in North Carolina, she tells him what she thinks about that. So listen carefully to this. I always notice this, and I think that this is so important.
Don't say those words to me and then go try to make peace with your wife.
Did you catch it? She says, don't say those words to me and go try to make peace with your wife. She almost says life, but she then corrects herself and says wife. Well, why is this significant? Because I think it's not just Chris Watts' wife, that Nicole Kessinger has a problem with and really would like out of the picture so she can have that hunk of hot loving all to herself. I believe she has a problem with his entire life that doesn't revolve around her. So that would be, of course, his children and Shanann at this point. And I'm sure if, their relationship did continue, they are on a trajectory for her to have a problem with everything in his life other than her. But that's a whole different video. Nicole Kessinger is not okay with any aspect of Chris Watts' life that is not Nicole Kessinger. I mean, do you guys agree? Leave a comment down below. So eventually Kevin Kobach tries to again redirect her to the topic at hand, finding out information about the murders of Shanann, Bella, and Celeste, and says, well, during the course of your relationship, the kids and the wife were gone most of the time. You got to spend a lot of time together. And listen to how she answers.
You guys are talking multiple times a day, at least. You're seeing each other on a regular basis.
Yep.
So it's a very, and his wife is not around, nor are his children. So there's a lot of time for you guys to build your relationship in this first four weeks or so. Is that fair?
Yeah, and even when she was back, I mean, it was still like we were still spending time together. He was still spending time with his children, and I had my own life.
Kessinger, law enforcement may not be onto you, but we are over here. What's the obsession? While she was back, we were still spending time together. Remember, we determined that during the course of their supposed 6-week relationship, Shanann was only home for literally 2 days of that. 2 days, August 8th and August 9th. Although what she is saying right here is a complete lie, a nonsensical and provable lie, there is the slightest bit of truth in what she's saying because yes, while Shanann was home in Colorado, she did spend time with Chris Watts on one day, and that was Wednesday, August 8th. In Nicole Kessinger's mind and in reality, August 8th was an absolutely critical day to the eventual outcome of this horrible tragedy. And as crazy as it feels, we've got to hand it to her. She is right about that. August 8th was clearly a very important day related to the outcome of this crime. If you saw the ultimatum part 1, you know that is absolute fact. Also important to the ultimate outcome of this horrible tragedy are all the other days that we have mentioned in this video in ultimatum 1. And that is that Friday, August 10th, when Shanann leaves to go to Arizona for the weekend, and Chris and Nicole Kessinger both take off of work, and Chris and Troy McCoy meet to exchange fire stick. Although I think that doesn't have anything to do with this crime. You're going to let me know what you think about that. Also, a critical day related to the outcome of this crime is Saturday, August 11th, the day of the lazy dog day, and of course, Sunday, August 12th, the day of the 111-minute phone conversation. And in all of those days that I just mentioned, there is so much that happened that is critical to this tragedy occurring on August 13th, 2018 that still remains unsaid. What we have learned from examining the truth of this case over the past several years is that critical moments on those last critical days oftentimes also remain undocumented in the case discovery. I'll tell you one thing, things start to look very interesting when you closely examine what exists, what has been hidden, and what has been altered, what has been destroyed, what exists in discovery. Combined with what we learned about Kessinger's actions and behaviors in the days following the tragedy and what she was trying to hide while she was being interviewed by law enforcement, when we compare what is known to be true and the stories that she clearly made up when she was being interviewed, shows us that she is likely somehow involved in this horrible, horrible tragedy. And what does not appear in discovery may indicate her guilt even more so than what is in that discovery document within the 1,960 pages. So here's what's real funny about the discovery. There are a lot of important events missing from the date August 12th, 2018. That is the day before Shanann, Bella, Celeste, and unborn baby Nico were murdered in the wee early morning hours of Monday, August 13th. It is a critical day, and there are so many critical details that are missing, from Shanann Watts' deleted post to Nicole Kessinger's conversations with other people besides Chris Watts, and the 111-minute phone conversation between Chris Watts and Nicole Kessinger. Even though the very first items in the official Discovery timeline is about Nicole Kessinger. It says on September 7th, 2017, Nicole Kessinger Google searched the name Shanann Watts. Although Nicole Kessinger's name is littered throughout the Discovery timeline, starting with September 1st, 2017, and she appears in it all the way through, her name literally appears scores of times in that Discovery timeline until, remarkably, Saturday, August 11th, 2018. The last mention of Nicole Kessinger until her mentioning goes dark the following day, that Sunday, August 12th, the day before the murders, is a search that she made after she and Chris went out on a date to the Lazy Dog restaurant, one location and then another. That timeline entry states at 22:04 hours, so that's 10:04 p.m. Having concluded her evening tryst with Watts, Kessinger searched the internet on topics like Chris Watts, Shanann Watts, Ronnie Watts, and 2825 Saratoga Trail. And then, all of a sudden, on Sunday, August 12th, Nicole Kessinger disappears from the Discovery timeline. Not to be mentioned, not even once. Conspicuously missing is the 111-minute phone conversation between Watts and Kessinger that Kevin Kobach asked her about over the course of his 4 interviews with her. Asked about that conversation a total of 9 times. All right, so although neither Nicole Kessinger or Chris Watts will tell authorities or anybody what the 111-minute phone call was about, there are a few things we do know about this phone call, so let's talk about those. So this phone call started at 9:28 p.m. on Sunday, August 12th, and the call ended at 11:19 p.m., again, Sunday, August 12th, which is just about exactly 2.5 hours before Shanann Watts is seen on her ring cam security camera footage and the Vivint alerts when she's coming home, and she's seen walking from Nicole Atkinson's car up to her house and through the front door. Again, this call ends just about exactly 2.5 hours before that moment when Shanann Watts enters her house for the final time. We know from the Discovery that several different things were happening around the time of and during that 111-minute phone conversation between Nicole Kessinger and Chris Watts. At the time of the 111-minute phone call, Shanann was in Arizona. She was at the airport awaiting her flight back home to Denver, Colorado. She was supposed to arrive home around 11 p.m. However, flights were delayed due to storms in Arizona. At 9:29, just 1 minute after the 111-minute phone call started, isn't that kind of strange? The Discovery says Shanann made an unanswered call to Watts. And then 13 minutes later at 9:44, Shanann told Watts that she tried calling him to give him an update. She's letting him know at that time the flight crew is not even there yet, so she's going to definitely be significantly late. At 11:21 p.m., 2 minutes after Chris gets off the phone with Kessinger, Watts finally replied saying, "Holy crap, sorry, I passed out on the couch. That's going to be late." We know that Shanann landed in the Denver airport a little before 1 a.m. and at 1:48 a.m., just about exactly 2.5 hours after the 111-minute phone call ended, the Discovery says Watts' phone logged the Vivint alert of Shanann's entry into their home. We know that anywhere from a moment after Shanann walked through the front door of 2825 Saratoga Trail for the very last time to just under 4 hours after she walked through that front door, her life tragically was ended. We know this because Chris Watt's work truck leaves for Survey 319 at 5:46 a.m. the early morning of Monday, August 13th, 2018, a day that will live in infamy. What you will not find in the discovery on August 13th or the day before, August 12th, in the timeline is any mentioning of Nicole Kessinger whatsoever. There's no indication of what Nicole Kessinger is doing the day before the murders, the eve of the murders, or the day of the murders. None at all. Do you remember these posts? Shanann Watt's final Facebook posts that were deleted, that were scrubbed from Shanann's Facebook account and seemingly the internet shortly after this tragedy happened. Ready to get home to Chris and the girls, she wrote around 3 p.m. on August 12th, the day before the murders, while she was in Arizona on her Thrive trip. And then at 5:20 p.m., she wrote, same day, August 12th, felt the baby move twice this weekend. And then there was another post, Shanann Watt's absolute final post in her lifetime to Facebook. And that post just simply said she was checked in at the Phoenix Sky Harbor International Airport and was flying to the Denver International Airport. And it said, ready to be home with Chris and the girl. And then there's a diagram showing her flight path from Arizona to Denver. This was posted on August 12th at 11:09 p.m. Shanann Watt's final post in life to Facebook was made 10 minutes before the 111-minute phone call with Nicole Kessinger and Chris Watts ended. So the big question here in this video is, was there an ultimatum? And the answer was yes. As I've told you, I've been working with 2 different people on obtaining information about this case and some information, some documents, some things that have not yet been made public. So, from the person who learned about the certainty of the ultimatum, I'm going to read you what is known. It is true. Nicole Kessinger knew Shanann was pregnant, and she knew that Shanann was pregnant at the outset of her affair with Watts. It is also true that Watts was fully aware that Miss Kessinger knew about Shanann's pregnancy. According to what we have learned, the honesty Miss Kessinger thanks Watts for in one of the June 12 emails was in fact his honesty in admitting that, yes, his wife was pregnant with his child. One of the important pieces of information we uncovered is that Watts and Kessinger were communicating before June 12th. The Anadarko email Tony Husky provided was not their first communication. From what we can tell, Watts and Kessinger communication started at the beginning of June, and the 2 were interested in one another right away. Miss Kessinger boldly confronted Watts with Shanann's potential pregnancy on June 12th, and we believe she learned about the pregnancy from Shanann's Facebook post.
I'm sorry. What I'm reading now is a letter from there were some people that deeply investigated this case separately from me, and then we joined forces. Let me get back to the beginning of that. I'm sorry. I just want to give this context. It's really important.
Flight path from Arizona to things that have not yet been made public.
Okay.
Before
Okay. All right.
before the
That's a good point.
111-minute phone call with Nicole Kessinger and Chris Watts ended. So the big question here in this video is, was there an ultimatum? And the answer was yes. As I've told you, I've been working with 2 different people on obtaining information about this case and some information, some documents, some things that have not yet been made public. So, from the person who learned about the certainty of the ultimatum, I'm going to read you what is known. It is true. Nicole Kessinger knew Chanel.
So this is a written remark from that person, one of the people investigating this along with me eventually, who kind of struck pay dirt with what they found, and that will be known to you very soon in the next few weeks. All of you listening to me right now.
Shanann was pregnant, and she knew that Shanann was pregnant at the outset of her affair with Watts. It is also true that Watts was fully aware that Miss Kessinger knew about Shanann's pregnancy. According to what we have learned, the honesty Miss Kessinger thanks Watts for in one of the June 12 emails was in fact his honesty in admitting that, yes, his wife was pregnant with his child. One of the important pieces of information we uncovered is that Watts and Kessinger were communicating before June 12th. The Anadarko email Tony Husky provided was not their first communication. From what we can tell, Watts and Kessinger communication started at the beginning of June, and the two were interested in one another right away. Miss Kessinger boldly confronted Watts with Shanann's potential pregnancy on June 12, and we believe she learned about the pregnancy from Shanann's Facebook posts. Was Kessinger okay with the pregnancy? Never. Watts assured her that he would figure out the formalities, and although he loved the two girls he had with Shanann, the unborn baby would not be raised as his child. We know Kessinger viewed Shanann's Facebook page.
So we know that that is what Chris Watts told Nicole Kessinger. Although he loved Bella and Celeste, the unborn child, the child that Shanann was pregnant with, was not going to be raised as his own child. This is what was told by Chris Watts to Nicole Kessinger. And guys, there are receipts and they will be shown.
Throughout her affair with Watts. So Watts' claim could not have been believable to her. Is it true that Kessinger wanted Watts out of his marital home ASAP? It was a constant contention in their relationship that was discussed constantly. We cannot know for sure, but it seems reasonable to believe that Kessinger believed Watts when he told her the house was going on the market and he was moving forward with moving out of the home on Saratoga Trail. Things were very intense between Kessinger and Watts during the week before the murders they're referring to. Tense as well. Kessinger was monitoring Shanann's Facebook profile more or less in real time the weekend before the murders. She saw Shanann's post, the first, the second, the third Facebook post on Sunday, each one more enraging to her than the previous. By the time the final post went up, she confronted Watts with a 2 from earlier in the day, and when she saw the final post, well, that was what pushed her over the edge, and she told Watts in no uncertain terms he was going to make a decision, and time was not a luxury he would have.
Okay, so those posts from Shanann Watts that we looked at in the very beginning, if you were here with me for all of that, what are we at? An hour 22? Let me find them. And I just went over again here where Shanann on Sunday is saying, oh, I'm, what did she say?
And seemingly the internet shortly after
I'm so ready to get
this
home
tragedy happened.
to Chris and the girls. Can't wait to get home. She posted 3 times on Sunday about this. So the last post was around the time of the 111-minute phone conversation. And it was that post from Shanann that she saw that pushed her over the edge and caused her to give Chris Watts the ultimatum. That was largely what the 111-minute phone conversation was about. You guys all get that? This is really important stuff. And did law enforcement know all the things that I'm telling you right now from the very beginning? Oh, yes, they did.
but I think it is significant. Post on Sunday, each one more enraging to her than the previous. By the time the final post went up, she confronted Watts with a 2 from earlier in the day, and when she saw the final post, well, that was what pushed her over the edge. And she told Watts in no uncertain terms he was going to make a decision, and time was not a luxury he would have. Based on what we learned, Watts asked for a week to work it out. Kessinger gave him 1 day. Okay, my friends, so that is what I have to tell you. Now, we are going to be talking more about this in the future. I want to discuss this with you guys during a live stream, but I think it is significant information. Now, I want to point out that I also recently found this in the discovery, and it says documents obtained so far in the investigation provide an estimated beginning and of an intimate relationship evidenced by written communication between Christopher Watts and Nicole Kessinger on or about June 8th, 2018. As a result, basically, they're getting records so far back in the past based on their belief that their intimate relationship started on or around June 8th. So that corroborates the fact that this person says that they started communicating in the very beginning of June, not June 12th, as I and others have suggested, when that first email that Tony Husky supplied was made public. And it looks like it's their very first communication, right? But apparently it may have been a little sooner. What do you think? So I want you to listen to this excerpt of Chris Watts' prison interview. Remember how Nicole Kessinger told law enforcement that when she was over at Chris Watts' house on July 4th, that they were just talking about the FitnessPal app and macros, and she just sat on the floor and
Sat on the floor, and it was on the 4th of July. It was the morning of the 4th, and I was helping him to set up my FitnessPal app and like track his food, his calories and stuff, because he does pretty good with the working out and stuff. And he asked me, he's like, "Can you help me just like get this dialed in?" It's like, "Yeah, I can do that." So that he invited me up to the house, and I was already kind of hesitant to do it because I was like, there are other people that live here, and I just felt like it was an invasion of space.
Chris Watts has a very different story than the one she's telling here. But the important thing, I want you to listen very carefully to this excerpt from the prison interview and pick out the points that he's making, aside just from what happened on July 4th itself, as it relates to his relationship with Nicole Kessinger, what she wanted, what she asked for, what she didn't want, what he wanted, what he was thinking could potentially happen. And I think really the greatest interest I have in this excerpt are the questions that particularly Graham Coder asks.
That wasn't the case. I was just letting it, exponentially get worse. Right. If I told him like, hey, he would have been like, whoa, man, like, all right, take a step back and look. Yeah. Right. And like, don't like fall into that trap. Being you're gonna be alone for 5 weeks. Right. And there's times I wish, like maybe Shanann didn't have to go away for 5 weeks. Maybe we all just went for 1 week. Yeah. Nothing would ever happen. Yeah. It's only, 5 weeks alone, that's the only reason really that was even almost even allowed to happen.
There are quite a few people who would tell us and who do tell us you need to look into Nikki Kessinger, all the way from the extreme end of things being Nikki's the one who ordered the hit.
She was there hiding in the basement.
She was there.
Yeah.
So the extreme is she's the one who told Chris to do it. She's the real problem. All the way, that's the extreme side, and then all the way to, well, there were these texts where she was infatuated, she was in love, she was saying how good Chris was in the sack, and maybe we should look at her more. What would you say to those people?
Like, she had her moments where I had to talk her like off a ledge kind of deal.
What does that mean?
It's like, I guess after the fact, there was like videos of her that she was like recording herself because she was like bipolar or something. I never knew that. But it's like, and she would get worked up about nothing. She would just like, she came to my house once because I think it was like July July 4th, I didn't have to work that day. So I didn't like get up at like, 4 o'clock and go home. And Shannon called me like, and I didn't hear it because I was sleeping. I was just like, and she was pissed. Shannon was pissed. And like I called her on outside, like, where are you at? Like what like I was like, I didn't have to work today. It's like called me at like, 5:30. It's like, well, kids want to talk to you at 7:30. I'm like I was sleeping. She's like, she just like, screw you, like, like I don't know where you're at. And I went back inside, told me I gotta go. And she was just like, okay, then you come back? And like, probably not.
So wait a minute, you kind of lost me there. Were you at Nikki's place when Shanann called you?
Yeah.
Okay, and so you were sleeping in her bed.
Yeah, because I wasn't going to work that day because I didn't have to that day. First holiday I ever had off. And, Shanann was pissed and, kind of pissed Nikki off too that I left. But I think that's when I'd called Nikki later and she was like, she kind of realized that, she'd always be like, the second, she said second fiddle. Sure. And because that's how I probably would come like that day. Just, I don't want to be anywhere else when Shanann calls. She was already pissed. So it was stuff like that where she would she would go, she said she would go on like websites and look at like, will a relationship work with somebody? Like, will a mistress work? Will a mistress turn into a relationship?
That's what Nikki was looking at?
Yeah.
She would tell you that or you
told me
that? Okay.
Yeah, she said that she would go on websites and look at stuff like that. I was like, why do you even look at stuff like that? She's like, I just want to see what other people have experienced.
But like, so that confuses me though, because I thought earlier you were saying she thought you were heading toward a divorce. So why was she looking at herself as
this was later on.
Oh.
Like, in August, like the first week of August, when I told her like, I had that talk with her about separation.
Uh-huh.
That's when like she started looking at like apartments and stuff. But like during our July relationship type thing there.
Oh, I see.
That's when she was looking up like, will it actually work? And she told her friend Brittany about it, I guess. And Brittany told her not to do it, but she said she'd already made a decision.
Okay. And so are those people absolutely wrong about Nikki? She wasn't asking you to get rid of your family?
No.
Are you sure? Okay. And no part of any of this was because she put it in your head or asked you to, or
this whole relationship contributed to it.
Sure.
But she didn't want me to.
I mean, was it ever like, I wish you didn't have kids. I want to have, kids of my own with you. Like
she never knew if she wanted to have kids, but she said that, at one point she said, I'd like to give you a son.
So some main points I gather from that excerpt are Nicole Kessinger's complete intolerance of Shanann Watts, period, and definitely Shanann Watts being in Chris's life, and really the whole family being part of Chris's life, but particularly Shanann. Also, Nicole Kessinger explicitly tells Chris she wants to give him a first son. We know that she knew that Shanann was pregnant with Chris's child from the very beginning. And there's a 50-50% chance that child was going to be a boy. So what about that? And the information that we've recently learned is that it can be confirmed and relied upon to know that Nicole Kessinger, not only did she know that Shanann was pregnant with Chris's child, she was not okay with it. Also, Nicole Kessinger, she's afraid she's going to be second fiddle. She doesn't want to be second fiddle. Well, honey, you're having an affair with a married man. That's what you are, and that's what you always will be. Also, we get a general idea of Nicole Kessinger's great instability in life, and this is something that most people would know if you've been following the case just from what she says in her behavior. But this is a conclusion that Chris Watts, I guess, came to and can explain it from a firsthand perspective. And I think it's very interesting that this story, he starts it out by saying sometimes she needed to be talked down from a ledge. Well, as it goes, apparently, Shanann Watts' final Facebook post, those 3 posts that were posted on Sunday, June 12th, are what pushed Nicole Kessinger off that ledge, the point of no return. And that's when she delivered Chris Watts an ultimatum. It's me or your family.
There are quite a few people who would tell us and who do tell us you need to look into Nikki more, Nikki Kessinger, all the way from the extreme end of things being Nikki's the one who ordered the hit.
She was there. I'm in the basement.
She was there.
Yeah.
You know, so the extreme is she's the one who told Chris to do it. She's the real problem. All the way, that's the extreme side, and then all the way to, well, there were these texts where she was infatuated, she was in love, she was saying how good Chris was in the sack, and maybe we should look at her more. You know, what would you say to those people? But like, so that confuses me though, because I thought earlier you were saying she thought you were heading toward a divorce. And so are those people absolutely wrong about Nikki? She wasn't asking you to get rid of your family.
No.
Oh, that was the end of that. I forgot that that ended so kind of like, yeah, to be continued, right? So, yeah, so there's a lot of information in there, guys. Oh my gosh. I think one of the main takeaways is that, well, we do know that Chris and Nicole Kessinger started communicating a little earlier than was stated, like according to Tony Husky. I don't know why that was chosen to be changed when the information went out to the public, but apparently it was. Also, we know that due to correspondences that were uncovered between Nicole Kessinger and Chris Watts, it is those 3 Facebook posts on Sunday, August 12th, the day before the murders, hours before the murders, when Shanann was expressing that she was at the airport, she was excited to get home to Chris and the girls, that she loved her family, that it was the third of those Facebook posts on that day that put Nicole Kessinger over the edge. She confronted Chris Watts with that Facebook post from Shanann and brought up the other 2 from earlier in the day, saying, why is she saying that she can't wait to get home to you and the girls? What is going on here? Because, he was giving her a different impression than was reality with Shanann, of course. And that is what provoked her to finally give Chris Watts that last ultimatum. That is not to say that it was the first time that the idea of getting rid of Chris Watts' family was ever brought up from Nicole Kessinger to Chris Watts, because I'm going to tell you, you're going to find out that it was. But that is what precipitated the ultimatum, and Nicole Kessinger delivered it. Cyberpunk Central says NK knew deep down that Chris Watts was not being honest. Yeah. They were just playing games with each other, Pepper says, second place for the Skanky Empanada. What do we have for her, Kelly? Well, we have a copy of my friend Kathleen Hootson's book, Girls of Summer. And guess what, Kessinger? You're the star, you skanky bitch. Oops, that was mean. Yeah, and so I think another important thing is those questions that we just heard. Kevin Kobach, I'm sorry, not Kevin Kobach. My God, Graham Coder is by far better at his job than Kevin Kobach is. But that series of questions we just heard him asking Chris Watts, I think are the questions that they went there to ask. I'm going to play that again, and then we're going to wrap up. But think of it like that. These questions are the questions that the law enforcement went to Dodge Correctional Facility in February of 2019 to ask Chris. Think of it that way. Let me know what you think. Let's see, where was that? Okay. Oh, okay. So this was the, oops. Well,
welcome back to the scene. I've had a couple of crime scenes where murders actually show up back at the crime scene.
Hold it. Let me just get to that part of the interview with Chris Watts, because I'm starting to mess things up. I'm tired.
Is a search that she made after she, which is
I just got to find it.
none at emails. Well, that was
food, his calories and stuff, because he does.
Shut up.
I think it ever happened.
Okay, here we go.
what she asked for, what she didn't
Well,
want.
I'm proposing that these questions that he's asking Chris Watts here, this is essentially the whole reason they went to talk to him, to find out if Nicole Kessinger was involved. And through some video I put out having to do with Dr. Phil and the Rourkes, they say that the lawyers for Shanann Watts' family members say that's why the investigators went to do this interview with Chris Watts, was to find out if Nicole Kessinger was involved.
What he wanted, what he was thinking could potentially happen. And I think really the greatest interest I have in this excerpt are the questions that particularly Graham Coder asks.
That wasn't the case. I was just letting it, exponentially get worse. Right. If I told him, like, hey, he would have been like, whoa, man, like, all right, take a step back and look. Right. And, like, don't, like, fall into that trap, being you're going to be alone for 5 weeks. Right. And there's times I wish, like, maybe Shanann didn't have to go away for 5 weeks. Maybe we all just went for 1 week. Yeah. Nothing would have ever happened. Yeah. It's only, 5 weeks alone, that's the only reason really that would even almost even allowed to happen.
There are
So I just want to point out in a way there, he's still blaming Shanann. You know what I'm saying? He is.
quite a few people who would tell us and who do tell us, you need to look into Nikki more, Nikki Kessinger, all the way from the extreme end of things being Nikki's the one who ordered the hit.
She was there, hiding in the basement.
She was there.
Yeah.
So the extreme is she's the one who told Chris to do it. She's the real problem. All the way, that's the extreme side, and then all the way to, well, there were these texts where she was infatuated, she was in love, she was saying how good Chris was in the sack, and maybe we should look at her more. What would you say to those people?
Like, she had her moments where I had to talk her like off a ledge kind of deal.
What does that mean?
It's like, I guess after the fact, there was like videos of her that she was like recording herself because she was like bipolar or something. I never knew that. But it's like, and she would get worked up about nothing. She would just like, she came to my house once because I think it was like July 4th. I didn't have to work that day. So I didn't like get up at 4 o'clock and go home. And Shanann called me like, and I didn't hear it because I was sleeping. I was just like, and she was pissed. Shanann was pissed. And like I called her outside, like, where are you at? Like what? Like I was like, I didn't have to work today. It's like called me at 5:30. It's like, well, kids want to talk to you at 7:30. I'm like I was sleeping. She's like, she just like, screw you, like I don't know where you're at. And I went back inside. Told me I gotta go. And she was just like, okay, then you come back? And like, probably not.
So wait a minute, you kind of lost me there. Were you at Nikki's place when Shanann called you?
Yeah.
Okay, and so you were sleeping in her bed.
Yeah, because I wasn't going to work that day because I didn't have to that day. First holiday I ever had off, and Shanann was pissed, and kind of pissed Nikki off too that I left. But I think that's when I called Nikki later, and she was like, she kind of realized that she'd always be like, the second. She said second fiddle. Sure. And because that's how I would come like that day. Just, I don't want to be anywhere else when Shanann calls. She was already pissed. So it was stuff like that where she would she would go. She said she would go on websites and look at will a relationship work with somebody? Will a mistress work? Will a mistress turn into a relationship?
That's what Nikki was looking at? Yeah. She would tell you that, or you heard that? Okay.
Yeah, she said that she would go on websites and look at stuff like that. I was like, why do you even look at stuff like that? She's like, I just want to see what other people have experienced.
But so that confuses me though, because I thought earlier you were saying she thought you were heading toward a divorce. So why was she looking at herself as
this was later on.
Oh.
In August, the first week of August, when I told her I had that talk with her about separation.
Uh-huh.
That's when she would start looking at apartments and stuff. But during our July relationship type thing there.
Oh, I see.
That's when she was looking up will it actually work? And she told her friend Brittany about it, I guess. And Brittany told her not to do it, but she said she already made a decision.
Okay. And so are those people absolutely wrong about Nikki? She wasn't asking you to get rid of your family?
No.
Are you sure? Okay. And no part of any of this was because she put it in your head or asked you to, or
You never, I mean, this whole relationship contributed to it.
Sure.
But she didn't want me to.
I mean, was it ever like, I wish you didn't have kids. I want to have, kids of my own with you. Like,
She never knew if she wanted to have kids, but she said that, at one point she said, I'd like to give you a son.
So some main points I gather from that excerpt are Nicole Kessinger's complete intolerance of Shanann Watts, period, and definitely Shanann Watts being in Chris's life.
We already went over that. Okay.
And really, the whole family.
Okay, so we already went over that. Okay, guys, I think I'm going to have to wrap it up soon because I'm going back to work part-time tomorrow, just 4 days a week from 8 a.m. to noon. Got to do it, especially after my basement got flooded in those terrible storms we had a few weeks ago, but it's okay. I was looking forward to having the summer off and just YouTubing it, but it's all right. I kind of miss working with my teens too, so that's all good. But thank you guys so much for being here. I did want to read some more comments. I mean, I've read them all. Let me read a few that I starred here. Well, I think this is definitely like a topic that we talk about in other type live streams, but I think it's a very insightful one. Calissa Cat says, seems like Chris Watts had some deep resentments towards Shanann for basically running their lives, but he never seemed to communicate how he felt and never an excuse. I know a few couples with this toxic dynamic. I think that's a really good point. Yeah, that toxic dynamic did exist. I think they had a very dysfunctional relationship in a lot of ways. In some ways, I guess it worked perfectly for them till it didn't. But of course, no matter what, it's no excuse for any kind of aggression or harm to another person, physical harm to another person, or certainly, God, murder. Cyberpunk Central, this is a great question. I've never heard this asked. Has anyone looked at her handwritten summaries she gave to police? Did she make any? Usually cops make interrogated people write summaries, I think. They do. Absolutely they do. Isn't that right, Anaphylaxis? But I've never seen any, and I would be willing to bet because she was treated in such a special way across the board. The same might be true with this question, but I think that is a really good point. I think it's a really, really good point. Or good question, good point. I'm getting tired, guys. Heather Williams had said earlier, it's so obvious she got a deal, and to Rourke, it doesn't matter the amount of involvement she had as long as she told them something. Right. He doesn't even bother to corroborate it, right? Neil Sun had told us, DA Rourke has a history of botching murder cases. He makes shocking mistakes. See the Ashley Fallis case. Fascinating case. Yes, that's right. And there's a few other. You're totally right. Anna Orlando said, I thought this was a really great comment when they were asking, when Kobach was asking Nicole Kessinger about the 111-minute phone conversation, she was like, just like totally like deer in headlights, did not want to answer the question. She said she's probably afraid they're asking Chris Watts the same thing. She just doesn't want to answer the question. Yeah, she's like, oh my God, what's our stories again? Do we have this lined up enough? Yeah, I think so. Really good points, guys. Great comments tonight. And thank you for those of you who, did super chats or Cash App or PayPal. Thank you so much for supporting me and the channel. I really appreciate it. Hey, Hibiscus Tea, how are you? So thanks all. Thank you for the time and energy you put into all of this. You share for all. Well, thank you. I really appreciate that, Hibiscus Tea. Really loved your comments tonight, Vero. Thank you. And Anaphylaxis, who's former retired law enforcement, answered my question about the written statements. Was it Lotus Spider? I think. Oh my God, I'm getting tired. It's sometimes done. It wasn't a regular thing at my police department. Okay, so that's why it's great to have someone who knows what they're talking about to consult with. Thank you for that. Oh, it's Cyberpunk who asked that question. Thank you. Thanks for answering, Anaphylaxis. You're the best. Oh, Coffee, we love you, girl. Thanks for being here, Lyrica Blue. Bebop says, and hey, Bebop, nice to see you. Says it was toxic, but what did the kids do? Oh, yeah, absolutely. My God. They did nothing, but they were just perfect. Jeez. Oh,
Valerie, hey Valerie, it's great to see you too. Asked, does anyone think it's because Shanann was gone for 6 weeks? I don't believe that. No, he's just making up another way to try to blame Shanann because he's a coward, like Vera says here. Yes. All right, guys, listen, I'm doing a live stream tomorrow night on Brian Koberger, the Idaho case. We're talking about new information that's been learned since the plea deal is a matter of public record, and also from some sources that this channel has. Hopefully, my two sources are going to come on sometime in the next few weeks. They just have to kind of get over their sick stomach about the whole plea deal situation. They felt unsettled about it. I think they're, I haven't actually talked to them in a few days, but at first they were upset about it. And we're also going to talk about learning from one or two people who have done hard time in state prison, what Brian Koberger's experience is going to be like in the state penitentiary, just, in the next few days during his intake process and then moving forward. So be there for that 9 o'clock tomorrow night. Thank you guys so much for being there. Please do me a favor right now. Hit like if you haven't. If you already did hit like, don't hit it again because it'll unlike it. Nice to see you. Nice to see you, Colleen Casey. And yeah, just thanks for everything. I love you guys. It's always great chatting with you and hearing your ideas. And I'm going to see you tomorrow night.